It's 6 p.m. I'm now recording. Good evening, all. Thank you very much for attending the workshop on September 22nd, 2020. We're here to talk about the First and Forest project as well as the 7th and Butler project. First things first, if you are not muted, please go ahead and mute your phones, mute your computers. If you have an Alexa, I will set your timer to 3 a.m. And we'll get echoes like that if you have your computer on or your mic on. So please turn your mics off right now. If you wish to do a public comment, open up the chat box and type your name and your address. And we'll be more than happy to call on you when the time is right. When it comes to the presentations, you may either discuss your issues first or wait for the presentation to be done. Then ask your questions or have your 3 minutes, which means that you would defer, or you can speak your piece at the beginning and be on your way or sit through the entire meeting. Remember that we do adhere to a decorum policy, meaning that we need to respect each other when we are discussing certain items. Again, when it comes to controversial items, we're still neighbors, residents, and friends. So we want to make sure that decorum is kept. If you are in violation of the decorum policy, you will be removed from the meeting. We need to make sure that when you are addressing somebody, you are addressing either the town council, myself, or staff. You are not to address other members of the meeting. That's a way because the ones that have the actual votes are your town council members and your mayor. It is not your neighbor, your friend, or the person down the street. Again, to make sure that we have the record clear, just make sure that you are muted because sometimes if there's noise in the background, your face will pop up or something will pop up as like you hear my kids sometimes screaming in the background. It's dinner time. You'll see my face pop up once in a while. But with that said, again, we want to make sure that we maintain the decorum. We are Windermere. We have high standards of not only our staff, our council, but also each other. So let's make sure that we adhere to that. With that said, I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to Mayor O'Brien.
Robert, I'd just also like to just remind everybody that this is that there is no voting tonight. This is our opportunity to have a little bit more freer flow of information, input, and share some information with each other that we're not able to do as council people because we operate in the sunshine. So this is our opportunity to do that. So it's a great time to get everybody's information out, but we will not be voting tonight. We will get direction from council as how to best proceed. With that, I'd like to go ahead and call our September 22nd, 2020 Town of Windermere workshop to order. It is now 6:03 p.m. and we have a quorum. And if you would all join me for the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I know that's tricky with Zoom, but we do try to do our best here to respect our country and flag. So we'll now begin with our invocation. Father, as always, we pray for your guidance as we make decisions and hear the input of our neighbors and community. Guide those and guide us as we do that. Also, we want to make sure that we remember all of our first responders who keep us safe and protect us, as well as all of those who serve here and abroad to keep us safe and free. Amen. So as Robert stated, for open forum and public comment tonight, we have a couple options for you. There are going to be a couple presentations, so some of you may choose and prefer to wait until that opportunity. You've heard that and had the opportunity to digest all that before you make your comments. Your comment time will be the same either way. But some of you may want to make comments early in the meeting now, and we normally have our public input portion. So you'll have 3 minutes to do that. And certainly anybody who would like to speak on the record, you are more than welcome to do so now. Please let us know that you want to speak through the chat box, and we will recognize you. And make sure you please provide your name and address prior to comment. Thank you.
Mayor, the first person we have signed up is Tom Stroop.
Okay, Tom, would you like to go ahead, sir?
Is it okay if I wait till after I see the presentation?
Yes, you
This
may,
is-
Tom. That's not a problem.
Okay, thank you.
For me too.
And Dawn too, thank you.
Mr. Stroop will defer.
Dawn Stroop stated that she will defer as well. Jim Willard? Mr. Willard did sign up. He may be joining us shortly, but I'm assuming that he's going to want to defer as well. Andrew McCarthy?
Mr. McCarthy has indicated that he would like to speak in the beginning.
Okay, so let me go ahead and start the 3 minutes and pull you up, Mr. McCarthy. All right, go ahead and I'll unmute you. All right, Mr. McCarthy.
All right. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Great. So I'm here to speak specifically to the Butler and 7th Avenue proposal, though my feedback's applicable to both of the projects being discussed. I certainly understand and appreciate the need and importance of these stormwater mitigation projects, and I'm not here today to say what I think should be done, but myself and others have had an opportunity to review the plans, and we have some questions and some concerns as well. And I think by laying those out, and the reason I want to speak before the presentation is by laying them out, perhaps some of those can be addressed in the presentation. So I think, you know, by doing so, we can give the council as well as the engineers a better understanding of where we're coming from, and perhaps enable both of those people to identify ways to perhaps amend the plans to address some or all of those concerns. I, in turn, hope that I can gain a greater understanding of the plans as they currently exist, because it's sort of impossible to do that through just drawings. And so I hope that I can do that. I hope the council won't view these plans as an immutable single solution, but perhaps can take this and view it as an iterative process and take into account some of the concerns and feedback that they hear tonight. My first question that I, you know, and I don't want it answered now, again, just, you know, consider it during the presentation. Why is the width of the proposed roadway 4 to 8 feet greater than the existing road? Is that a necessary design component? Is it because of the depth of the proposed ditches, and perhaps can those depths be amended to mitigate this increased roadway depth?
1 minute, Mark.
I see a number of trees are impacted, and I wanted to know if I'm correct in assuming that means destroyed, and if so, what mitigation is proposed. In designing the improvements, to what extent was the location of trees considered? And if the plan was amended to take into account significant trees, can you point to examples of that in the plan? And has the town considered the effect that a widening of the roadway will have on the average speed at which people travel on these roadways? I know that speed control has been a concern that this town has expressed in the past. And I wonder if the town or its engineers have considered FDOT and U.S. Department of Transportation studies about the effect that this widening would have on the average speed. So those are all my questions, and I'll defer to the next person.
Right on the money, Andrew. 3 minutes.
Thank you, sir.
We do have those addressed in our presentation in case the next speaker wanted to comment on those as well. I see that Jim Willard did join us. Mr. Willard, did you want to speak or defer until after the presentation? He may be still getting his stuff hooked up. Joan Foglio, I see that you have signed up as well. Would you like to defer?
Yes, I think I put that in my text. I'll defer.
Okay.
I want to wait. Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Thanks.
Susan Carter?
I'd like to go ahead and speak because I'm on a time limit tonight, but I would like to echo Andrew McCarthy's comments and say that I agree with what he's asking. I'm also concerned very concerned, as is tree board, about the impact on trees. And furthermore, are we taking anything into consideration about removing trees and how that impacts erosion? Trees are there to help with erosion, and is there a potential to plant more that might help with this? And then furthermore, I've driven down to 7th, and I'm not seeing where that is a huge issue as far as drainage goes. And so speaking for tree board, we don't want to see trees removed unnecessarily. We don't want to see the roads widened. And I'm not necessarily seeing a need for this type of expansion or drainage. So in my humble opinion. So that would be it.
All right.
Thank you, Susan. Could you state your name for the, or sorry, not your name, but your address, do you mind?
Susan Carter, 106 Palm Street.
Thank you for the record. Appreciate that.
All right. Teresa Stressman-Myers, I believe she did say that she wanted to go ahead and defer. Nora Brophy.
Oh, sorry, I had to unmute. So yeah, my comment is just on the roads more generally, which is that in looking at this proposal and also the one for the 2nd Avenue improvements, you seem to want to widen all the roads. And certainly as someone who lives on a street that's impacted by cut-through traffic, I would prefer to see the streets narrower. I mean, we don't want to facilitate traffic through the town. We want to slow it down. I think most of the neighbors are in agreement that we want people to drive more slowly and more carefully on our roads. So I just think in general, that should be a goal on our dirt roads. I mean, I would like to see a plan, an overall plan for the maintenance and management of our dirt roads. And, that should be a part of it. Like, how big do we want these roads to be? So, thank you.
Thank you, Nora. Dean Miller, would you like to speak now or defer?
I'd like to defer, please.
We may have found our echoing culprit. Stephen Weathers, would you like to speak now or defer?
Defer.
Thank you, sir. Sarah Lopez, would you like to speak now or defer?
Defer, please.
Thank you. Carol Willard, would you like to speak now or defer?
Defer, please.
No more echo. Got a happy birthday, Bob, in there. Another happy birthday, Bob. Brandy would like to speak after the stormwater project. Happy birthday, Bob. And Sarah Lopez, I'll wait. And then Anna Mae Klontz, she would like to defer after as well. So Mayor, at this time, if you don't mind, we would go ahead and move forward with the first discussion point, which is First and Forest. So at this time, I'm going to stop my share, and then Victor is going to go ahead and share his screen and go over that project and provide you some updates.
Robert, can you disable the sharing?
Yeah, you would think I should do that. So I was about to give you a hard time, but it was my fault.
Oh my. There we go. Got it. Can you see my my screen?
Yeah, you may want to zoom in for discussion purposes.
Okay. This is the outfall improvement job for Forest Street between 2nd Avenue and 1st Avenue. We put this exhibit together. Let me see if I can zoom in a little bit more. Just to kind of talk about in a plan view level what the concept of our preferred solution looks like. In hatching, cross hatching red, you can see the existing road, the existing forest, northeast to your right. And you can see on light blue, the new alignment of Forest Street. And basically it follows the similar alignment. It just has a typical of 9-foot lanes, 6-foot shoulders, and open swell on left and right. Just to go over the legend here, you can see the 9-foot dirt road that we're proposing in blue. The green is the proposed shoulders. The brown is to show the grass swales that we will proposing and the limits of that, obviously between driveways. And the cross-hatching, like I mentioned, is the dirt roads. In the bottom, what you can see is the existing profile in dash green. And in magenta, you can see the proposed profile of forest. So we have, well, one more thing that to highlight in this exhibit, and I will share the plans which show the concept drainage, highlighted. But here it's also just to, there's the reason why you see the beginning of the blue here, even though the project will include any improvements necessary for these wells here, is because it's also a project along 2nd Avenue that has a terminus at about this station right here. So we're doing our full typical, basically starting from this point. I don't know if you can see my hand here. Okay, well, it's better. Right here at station 101 plus 70. And there will be a project that comes here and has a ends basically right here. But we, on our project, we're improving the drainage and the outfall to address the main purpose, the current flooding and that occurs along forest currently. And we have, we have also a graphic on what the typical section looks like out there. Before I get into our findings from getting in, survey information and results on what we're gonna do with the drainage, we want to show you how the typical section looks like. So basically, the road varies between 10 to 14 feet currently. We're gonna bring it to a proposed, it's a desired 9-foot travel lanes. So we presented this as a concept to the town with 6-foot shoulders and as well. And it will vary between 1.5 to 2 feet deep. In some areas it will be just 6 inches to 1 foot deep. But there will be grass. I know the color, probably picked a better color here instead of brown, but it will be grass and it will be, it will have a matting, erosion control matting that will help him with stabilization. But it will look like mild swells. But there will be, the big change will be that it will be about 1 to 2 feet where necessary. There's another typical here that I want to show you because we wanted to keep the alignment of forest as close as existing as possible, because there's a large 43-inch oak tree here that we're trying to preserve. There was, we have alternatives where we were impacting it. We were able to squeeze and stay away from it. That was not the case with other trees, but where we could, we were able to avoid them. In that section where we are where we're shifting the road closer to the right of way, we are proposing a shoulder gutter. There's again the crown, 9 feet drain this way, 9 feet drain the other way. And because we have a little bit more room, it's going to be a shallow, almost like a retention area, very, very shallow retention area that will help with any with any storage needs and sediment basin needs prior to entering into a system again. So these are the two typicals we wanted to show you. And I know that you were the town set, the plan set, the concept plans that we presented to the town. I'm gonna see if I can share this. Robert, can you see this screen, this plan sheet?
The only sheet I see is the one that you originally posted. So,
okay, let me see if I can. How about now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So this one is a better view. It doesn't really show where the existing road is located because of the trees and the shade and the angle of the aerial, but you can see the how we are changing this closed system that is continually getting clogged and creating issues with flooding, especially in the area right in between second and first, to an open system. So one of the things that we're doing is now we are avoiding having water running down the dirt road and letting it scour and doing sediment transport into our buried storm sewer system. And because in that moment we are only relying on the capacity of the pipes. Once the pipes are clogged, then there's no longer a reliable storm sewer system, and then we see all the flooding. Now we're opening it up to an open system of ditches and swales. Based on the survey, we have a good fall all the way to the end where we introduce it back into the existing system on first. There will be also an improvement on the last pipe, and there will be, I know we talked to some residents that they've been experiencing issues with the around the seawall. We are looking at erosion stabilization measures there. We're looking at articulated block or some armoring system to be able to avoid having any more issues of erosion right at the outfall near the lake outfall where the docks are located. But basically, having an open system here of side drains and covers on the driveways, be able to use that open area here for retention and sediment catching, and then the other thing that we were able to do is to maximize the use of the existing system. There's a lot of what's called French drains and exfiltration trenches that are providing, not when clogged, but when unclogged, are providing treatment and prior to discharging directly into the lake. So we want to continue using those, but trying to avoid having sediment going directly into those systems. I think the one more thing is that there is a tree that is getting impacted. Let me see, let me just go and switch to the other one. There is a 36 oak tree that is getting impacted with this concept. As you're gonna hear, from how we are looking at all the trees throughout our project to make sure that there's anything else we can do, or if they are, what kind of life that these trees have. But at this moment, to maintain this open system, to give resiliency to a dirt road facility, we are impacting this tree. So other than that, I think that's with the roadway footprint for this project. On the modeling side, we have modeled the existing condition. When we did a study previously that revealed that the need for a better outflow than using an existing 15-inch pipe. The study quite did not match the reported flooding there. We basically had to clog the whole pipe to be able to see results that were matching our the flooding reported. When we got survey recently, we were able to see that there's those pipes just being a 50% capacity based on the silt being clogged on the pipes, we're revealing water all the way up to the right of way. It was so when we saw that recently, we were able to confirm that improving the outfall and keeping an open drainage system that connects to the larger pipe system along first was able to give us that confidence that this when we provide this open system with larger pipes and swells, we'll be able to solve the problem that the residents see in annual storm events as well as more severe storm events. That's
Thank you, Victor.
report.
How, did you have anything to add, or did you want me to just go ahead and do a quick overview?
Let's do a quick overview. Also, Robert, maybe just a little background on how we ended up looking at this area again.
Absolutely.
I mean, I think that most people understand that, but I want to make sure that everyone does.
Absolutely. A few years back, the town received monies from South Florida Water Management District to focus on the First and Forest project because it was prone to flooding in that basin area. And the town made a conscious decision to make sure that we maintain dirt roadways as much as possible. So with that said, the project was engineered and designed by Mike Allura, who put in a French drain system, and subsequently we had a very rainy season. I believe that was in 2017, maybe 2018. And it resulted in not only a lot of issues with the project itself as far as collecting a lot of sediment within the pipes itself, because the pipes go down, it's a French drain system, and with the dirt roadway, sediment gets into those pipes and clogs the pipes to where the amount of flow that is supposed to go down those pipes, it constrains that, so it tends to overflow. And then we also had property owners that were adjacent to these projects that were prone to not seeing a lot of flooding on their properties, started to see flooding on their properties. So the town decided to go ahead and take a look at or relook at not only design of the First and Forest project, but the entire basin itself. So that's why we're here tonight, is to look over the concept plan that we're talking about. And the same thing with Butler. Again, the big word tonight is concept. We're not in final design. So things can be maneuvered, things can be reduced, and additional things can be done prior to the final design of either or project. And again, based on the fact that, we're now looking at West 2nd Avenue because we have the LMS funds to actually fund that project. Kimley Horn Associates is doing a peer review of that project and trying to tie in whatever impacts are at 2nd and Forest down to 1st and Forest. So what we have here tonight is to try to alleviate, the issues on First and Forest and that entire basin area. And I believe the intent is to try to steer a little bit away from the French drain system and create the swale system with a typical section that you see today. And the typical section is somewhat similar to what you see on Butler and 7th. And just so everybody understands is that just because it's brown, it says ditch, it's a swale. The shoulder's grass, the ditch is grass. It's typically what you see as far as a swale system that goes up and down the street. And then some people question, well, why is it, 9 feet per travel lane? And this was one of my errors when I sent an email early this morning. I believe that the Green Book, which is the Florida Green Book, which is pretty much the standard that the engineers utilize, it's an industry-wide standard the engineers utilize to make sure they maintain a minimum travel lane for dirt roadways. And that's actually the minimum for a dirt roadway for the engineering standard is a 9-foot travel lane. So the total width of the travel lane would be actually 18 feet. I was mistaken by the 16 feet. The minimum for an emergency vehicle is 15 feet, but the minimum for the Green Book standard is 18 feet. Now people might say, why are you adhering to the Green Book standards? We have to adhere to at least some standard. If you're not adhering to a standard, the more you deviate from a standard, you're going to have to justify it. Not only if there's a legal issue in the future, but also if you're seeking grant funding for a lot of these projects. Butler and 7th, Bessie, and 2nd Avenue are all federally funded, which means that we have to meet minimal standards in order for us to fund these projects. And some of you might say, well, let's just go ahead and fund them ourselves. We don't have the money. We have about $120,000 a year in stormwater projects that we can do. And I can guarantee you a lot of these projects are going to be well into the hundreds of thousands of dollars to remediate the issues that people are seeing right now. And I'll get into a long discussion relative to Butler and 7th and what we look at. But right now we're looking at concept plans. So that's what you see in front of you is what the concept is on how to alleviate the issues that people on First and Forest are looking at. We will be working with arborists to see if there's trees that are negatively impacted, how can we protect those trees? Whether it's going to move that typical section south or east or move it west, or there's a possibility that we can reduce the actual right-of-way width in certain areas as long as we have a reasonable explanation to why we are doing it. Tree impacts, environmental impacts, those are all, real reasons to actually reduce the width. And I believe that FEMA or any regulatory agency that is going to approve a grant will adhere to that as well. But as long as you're maintaining a median width of 9-foot travel lanes, then you should be free and clear, whether it be through getting future grants, so on and so forth. Now, this is actually being fully funded by the town, so you can go less than the 18-foot travel width. But as town council has said in the past, we want to maintain dirt roads. The issue that we have is that we have a hodgepodge of roads widths all throughout town. Now, people refer to fixes or semi-fixes that were done in 1983, 1993, 2003, 2011, 2012. All these projects were done without engineering. These projects pretty much die when you have people leave, when you have transition in employment. So, the fixes, the graders and stuff like that, unless you have a typical section and an overall maintenance plan to maintain that typical section, it's very hard to, again, do an overall plan for the entire town because we're consistently inconsistent on what our roadways look like. But our intent is to, based on the concepts, is to make the roadway width as minimal as possible with the 9-foot travel lanes and then utilizing the shoulders and the swale systems to capture the stormwater until its final destination, which would be the actual retention area, and it percolates into the lakes. And if I said anything incorrect, Victor, you can go ahead and correct me. With your scope, it does include a final design. But again, right now, it's just showing you what the conceptual fix to this issue would be based upon the entire basin area, based upon the improvements to West 2nd Avenue, and the issues that the adjacent residents have seen over the last couple of years. Right, Victor?
That's good. That's good.
All right, thank you. Just want to make sure that is anything out of line. And again, you know, just because it shows a brown area, which is a horrible color to show people that it's going to be a ditch or something like that. You look at a 4-to-1 slope so you can mow it. It's grass. It's what you typically see as far as a swell system. And believe me, like with every other project that we do, we include arborists. We make sure that we try to protect every tree that we can. You know, even if there is an assessment done and it's determined to be in poor health, we'll try to do what we can to make sure that we regain its health if it's possible. And again, we have 60-foot right of way that we can meander this roadway by utilizing that, that typical section.
So, Robert and Victor, for clarification purposes, if it says a tree is impacted, does that mean the tree is going to be cut down, or does that mean that do we have alternative methods to deal with the impact on that tree? And just so we're all speaking the same language.
Again, you know, through the concept, we didn't utilize a certified arborist because we want to come up with a concept before we get into actual design plans. But we would defer to the arborist to see and to listen to make sure that if there's any way, if there was like no way that we can go further to the east or further to the west to get out of its either drip zone or its root system, you know, what other best practices are available to save those trees? And then if there is pretty much no other way to save those trees and it has to come down, we'll make sure that we mention that to the property owner. In addition to that, we would try to do whatever we can to make sure that we replant and reestablish whatever tree canopy is there. That does not have a negative impact on the stormwater system that's constructed. Right, Victor?
Correct. Yeah. So as far as the exhibit goes, for the footprint and the concept that you've seen, our assumption, without getting the arborist involved at this point, is that the edge of the road, too close to the hazard that the tree is. Therefore, we are to have this dialogue and conversation. We assuming that this will be impacted. We're able to stay out of the or what we assume to be the root system on this one. But again, this one still needs to be checked with the arborist. At this point, we think that we're avoiding it. But again, that process is going to be part of the design.
Yeah, and a lot of people, in the chat box, again, chat box is considered public comment. So we can either address your comments or not. But, when it comes back to, is this something the homeowners want? Is this something, are you just, clear cutting, stuff like that? No. This is not an adversarial discussion. We have to provide engineering standards, and we have to provide concepts for the town council to make decisions on. And once we have a concept established, then we get into the actual design. And during that time, we try to alleviate any impacts to what is perceived to be the property owner's property, which is the right of way. Even though it's our property, we can utilize the entire 60 feet if we wanted to. We're very conscious of the fact that people perceive that as their front yards, and we want to make sure that we minimize any negative impacts as much as possible. So I think we've proven that in the past, and we'll make sure that we prove that in the future. So it's not that we're doing something haphazardly. These people on 7th Avenue, or 7th Avenue, but First and Forest have been realizing this flooding issue for quite some time. And this is how we plan to fix it. Again, the council determined that it wanted to maintain the dirt road system, and with that comes pros and cons. A paved road system would only use about 20 foot of right-of-way width. When you go to dirt roads, it's going to require, again, more area for us to utilize in order for us not only to maintain the roadway, but also to maintain the stormwater.
I think it's also important to note that in this particular solution, this solution is also to make better the underground system that is being utilized in the large basin area there, which it's working, but I think that it was felt that we needed additional capacity, and the maintenance of that type of closed system is part of the reason why we're not super anxious to go back to another closed type system.
Agreed. So if the council could give us direction on the typical section, that would be great. But again, we do have a few people that signed up for public comment relative to the First and Forest project. We'd be more than happy to answer those questions or answer questions from the town council. But again, a lot of people ask, why are you doing the 9 feet travel lanes? And again, that is to make sure that we were following some sort of standard. Any less than that, we would have to justify on our own and defend that in case something were to happen. So with that said, I can turn it over to council, or if you want to go ahead and public comment, it's your choice, Mayor.
Thank you, Robert. I think at this point, prior to council discussion, if there are individuals who desire to comment on this particular project, this is the forest project, First and Forest, we'd like to hear from those individuals now so we can have their input, and then we'll have council discussion on that. Sound fair?
We do have Sarah Lopez that wishes to speak. Sarah, I'll go ahead and get the clock ready for you.
Okay, very good. Thank you. This is Sarah Lopez at 110 Forest Street. I am really sorry to say that no, the brown color seems completely appropriate, as that is the way that I'm feeling as I'm looking at those drawings. This is, to be honest, very disappointing on my part. I don't know how the rest of you feel, but after seeing the comments on the chat, it seems that there is quite a consensus. So yeah, no, brown is definitely the right color. So during the previous conversations that we have had, we've talked about the surveying and where the water was coming from. And the way that I'm looking at this, and something that Victor has mentioned, is that the water still is coming all the way to the very end, which is literally in front of my house. So you're looking at adding swells and shoulder gutters, starting at the Carson's property all the way through my property, which is the end of Forest Street. There has been no communication and there has been no discussion in terms of trying to slow down the water before it gets all the way to that level. On top of that, you're going to be widening the streets. You have talked about the maximizing of the usage of the current system. That system is not working. I understand that you're calling it from a closed system to an open system. And to be honest, that is unacceptable. Those pipes have not worked. You have been telling us how they needed to be cleaned. They have not been cleaned, they have not been maintained, and those drainage systems have not been working at all. You continue to let us know how the level of the water in the lake has continued to be at higher levels than usual. The level of the water in the lake has not decreased this year. I'm also going to say that if you were to have what you are suggesting in front of your house, when your house was fine 3 years ago, I think you would be flabbergasted to have the swells, the shoulders, the widening of the street, and furthermore, remove an oak tree that you're just discussing, if nothing. But that is not a water oak tree. That tree is a very strong tree that is being discussed and is just going to be removed. The one that says impacted, that is my tree. So as I'm looking at the problems, I am not seeing any fix in anything of the information that has been proposed tonight in accordance to all the solutions that were discussed in the previous meetings. The issue that you continue to have and that I continue to see is that you continue to want to work with a system that is faulty, and that a system that you're trying to go around something that the city did that did not work, and that is something that you guys continue to make worse. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lopez. I believe, Robert, this is not a sole solution. I believe that the work and mitigation on 2nd Avenue that is being shredded and discussed now also plays a role in this. Is that accurate?
Yes, they're going to be doing peer review of West 2nd Avenue and the stormwater improvements on that roadway. So hopefully there will be a net benefit to those that live on First and Forest that see any reduction in stormwater that may flow from that area. And when you look at the brown area, I'm going to go ahead and, Hal, if you can go ahead and cue up the picture of what that brown area would look like.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go ahead and share this. If you can go ahead and.
Yep. So if Victor stops sharing, then I can start once you give me the okay.
And Mr. Gonzalez, we will send you over some printed plans because I don't want you going blind by looking at the computer with a magnifying glass.
You can see you.
Yeah.
But I see all the details.
Yeah, well, good. I mean, we can make printed up plans. Again, we're still in the concept phase, and this is to everybody. We're more than happy to go to your site and meet with you individually and show you the impacts. Again, what, talking about Ms. Lopez's tree, if there's a way that we can meander it, if we can reduce the right-of-way width in that area. Again, as long as we maintain 18 feet, as far as the distance itself, if we reduce it in some areas because of trees, because of environmentally sensitive areas, we can do that. And that's why, we're here to figure out, okay, what impacts are there? What concerns do you have? And we can manipulate the plan to alleviate those concerns as reasonably possible.
And Robert, I have offered time after time after time to meet with the engineers. They have not contacted me whatsoever one time. We have been dealing with the problem now for years since the city approved the previous system. This is unacceptable. So if the tree stays or if the tree has to go, which I truly hope that it doesn't, even that is not going to fix the other problems that I mentioned.
Understood. And, we have switched engineers on this project from Michael Laura to Kimberly Hunter Associates. And if there has been any communication or non-meeting, then I'll make sure that I address that with all the parties. But what Howe is showing here is what that ditch would look like. You have a shoulder, which is between 3 and 6 feet, typically 6 feet because of the safety clearance. And then you have the actual swale itself. I apologize for the screaming in the background. My kids, again, are having fun eating. But that's what the swale system would look like. It's grass, it's Bahia, it's not San Augustine. And, that hopefully, in all engineering standards would take care of the flooding issues on First and Forest.
Yeah, I do. I'm reading the stuff on the drawings.
So if you'll look too, just for everyone's viewing, when you look at the driveway and you see the darker color driveway and then the lighter color driveway, that line, that is where the town right-of-way ends and the private property begins for this particular piece of property, just to give some scale in terms of the size right-of-ways. And those are there for a multitude of reasons, but one of the reason is so we're able to do infrastructure type projects within that space. But certainly we want to do what we can to minimize those. And I know we all think of that as our front yard too. So, I just want to give it some scale.
Mayor, do we know where this property is so the residents can drive by and take a look?
So this is, I believe, at Oakdale and 7th.
Oakdale and 9th.
Oh, Oakdale 9th, I apologize. 835 Oakdale, I believe someone typed. Thank you, Brandy.
Northwest corner.
Yeah.
It's with the big house, the black and kind of black and white house that just recently was built and sold there.
Yeah.
And Hal, if you can show the other pictures as well, please, too. And then Ms. Lopez, again, I apologize on behalf of staff of the lack of communication. We'll make sure that we cure that. So again, you can see here, I believe this is Bay Shore, where we had a flooding issue as well. But this is a paved roadway, but that's what we're looking at as far as a ditch. It's not a brown ditch, it's a grass ditch. Now, will sediment actually be, will there be sediment in there eventually? Yes, they're gonna have to be maintained and they're gonna have to be dug out eventually to get them back to where they should be. And people might ask, well, can they be deeper? Can they be smaller? We need to maintain a 4-to-1 slope to make sure that we can mow them.
Yep.
But again, if there's trees or anything like that, we can reduce maybe the shoulder, or we can move it to the west or to the east to try to protect any negative impacts to, again, trees or anything like that.
And in this one, you'll see an example of where the culvert or ditch area is actually adjusted to try to preserve and mitigate damage to the oak tree there.
I see that Mr. Gonzalez has a hand raised.
Yes. Yeah, but you left the first project, and that's okay if you want to keep going to talk, but I have some information on that the others might like. You already know it.
I don't understand. Are you talking about First and Forest?
Yeah.
Yeah, page 16.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing, Victor, and then you can pull up the First and Forest plans again.
Yep.
Okay, Richard, I'm going to go ahead and put you on the clock, sir.
Yeah. Did you have one that had color coding markings on it? That's the one I was looking at before. Yeah, there you go. As you know, I've been living here a long time, and when I first moved in, I put swales on the corner of my property and the town's property, and it's right on that. I assume that's the property line there. And since then, the town has been using that ditch, and I purchased the house across the street, and I put swales over there. Those swales have since silted in because they weren't kept dug out, and that was not necessarily the town's responsibility to do that at that time. But right now, the rains that have come in the ditch that's adjacent to my property and have been handled and are not leaving the property through French drains that I put in that were there before you did anything with collection of that water. And those French drains were dug 6 feet deep, and 1-inch lime rock was put into them, and it took about 24 hours for the water to go down under normal heavy rainstorms, not hurricanes. So the ground is capable of recharging there if you had more of those ditches. So over the years, I put a small one in front of that house there, where Keith lives and where Sarah lives, back in that era, and I put some French drains in there too. And over the years, they kind of did okay. And the hurricanes, they of course swamped the whole block and the whole area because trees fell and other things fell. So there were great pools of water that came down 2nd Avenue and then used all of 2nd Avenue as a reservoir for holding water till it could be handled or moved into the
1 minute left.
Yeah, so I have more to say about that sometime, and it would be effective to understand the design. because there are things that should be done here, the simple ones, and then the more complex ones, do them if we need to do them. And I offer to help on those. That's all I want to say.
Thank you, Richard. Any additional comment from residents or public regarding the Forest Street proposal?
Can you please discuss the blue lines, the pipes that are going in between the car stands and my house, please?
The blue.
Let me switch
Victor,
to
you'll
the
have
other
to
one.
address that.
Yeah. So there's an open system that was shown in brown here and in brown in between these driveways that will now connect with the swells and with side drains, like the picture the house showed, all the way down to First. So there will be pipe here, pipe here. They are, you can see there are some manholes and that are basically closing the old system, but still utilizing the pipes from flows upstream that we're still utilizing. But basically the system right in front of these houses are providing the redundancy and the proper grade to get water that is currently pooling in this area out to the much larger system of pipes in along First. So,
sorry, Victor, that's not the one I'm referring to. The one I'm referring to is if you go to the color one, there's a big pipe going in between 110 Forest and the house to the left if you're viewing. So if you go to the color slide, is the one that's going, yep. If you move your hand a little bit northwest, you see the is actually physically going over my house.
Oh, these ones here?
Yeah. But I'm assuming the pipes are the smaller to the, a little bit to the left. So if you can discuss all that, that'd be fantastic.
Oh, yeah, no problem. So what we have here is these are line work from the surveyor. We have property lines that are shown in light blue. And I believe this is another property line here. And this is, these are not existing pipes. These are just topography line work. There is no proposed pipes in this area here.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I
No,
thought that at some point it was being discussed to create some piping work in there. So those are just surveying lines. Okay. Thank you for confirming.
Sarah, you are right. We did have a proposal or a concept that did have some pipes in the rear and a couple that came out through the side yards. So that's probably where that came from.
We have Mr. Carson with his hand raised.
Keith?
All right, thanks, Council. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, sir.
So as far as the drawings go on the swell system in the brown rectangles, that does go right up to the property line, is what's reflected. Are you saying that that's not necessarily where the end of the swells are going to be, or just generally in that area, or is the swell going to encompass that whole right-of-way area?
Robert, I want to answer that. So what we're showing is, we're gonna tighten up the design from the concept level, through permitting, through final construction plans. What right now we want to show is that this area from shoulder to right of way can potentially get impacted. Now, when we finish the calculations, we determine the proper capacity, and then the ditch may be a little narrower. The town has allowed us to use a V-shaped bottom you know, so it may be 3 feet, it could be 0 feet bottom in the swell. So it depends on what capacity we require once we are completely done with the design. At this concept level, we just wanted to show, you know, we wanted to be transparent. We may have to go all the way to the right of way, but it may not be what we end up with.
All right. And the second question I have is for Robert. The widening of Forest Street to the 9-foot travel lane, which I assume is northbound and southbound, which equates to 18 feet in width. Is that required for drainage considerations, or is that required to see if we can get this paid for through a grant?
Well, this specific roadway is not being paid for via a grant. We use the South Florida Water Management Grant just for the piping and no improvements to the actual roadway. The minimal design standards are not only adopted by the state of Florida, but by the federal government as minimum standards for dirt roadways. And the more, again, that we deviate from anything that has been approved by either the federal government or state government, as far as widths or as far as design guidelines or principles, the harder it is not only to maintain your existing grants, but also seek further grants. So that is the purpose for the 9 feet. Now, again, as I stated before, there may be some areas where we can reduce that in order to accommodate trees, stuff like that. But as long as we're maintaining that 9-foot travel lane, which is a total of 18 feet, that gives us potential for grants or for other earmarks or funding in the future if they become available.
All right. The first project was permitted and designed and paid for, my understanding, through a government grant. Why now and why not then?
The South Florida Water Management Grant?
Yes.
I can't state why. I believe it was just for putting in piping. But again, as council wanted, they wanted to make sure that we had typical sections that were going to be easily maintained and have consistency between those typical sections. So when we have a maintenance plan for one, we have a maintenance plan for another.
Okay, so this is for ease of maintenance plan, potential grants in the future, but does not have an impact on the engineer's design for the management of water between 2nd and 1st on Forest. Is that accurate?
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
I said it's important for your maintenance plan moving forward. It's important for the town to be considered for further grants on other projects or further grants for projects on this road, God forbid. But the widening of the road is not necessary for the mitigation of water in this particular plan. Is that accurate?
I would say that is accurate. I would defer to both Hal and Victor, but again, for the maintenance of a typical section, you know, we would want to stay with the 9-foot travel lanes. But if Victor or Hal have a different opinion, they're more than happy to go ahead and speak it at this time. But no, in my personal opinion, it doesn't.
So, the Florida Green Book, which Robert is referring to, is the minimum standards for the state of Florida for all public rights of way, not just DOT. So it's applicable for local roadways as well. And so that is what requires the 18-foot minimum for the lane width. So every time that, if we were just to come in and we were just to do the drainage improvement and not touch the existing road at all, that could be an option. And you're right, widening the road doesn't address the drainage. Widening the road is if we're going to realign the road as engineers practicing in the state of Florida, we try to bring things up to minimum standards that the state provides for public rights of way.
All right, I think I understand. Thank you. That's the only question I have.
Thank you, Keith.
So a clarifying question. I'm sorry, I saw Stephen Withers with your hand up there. Clarifying question, in terms of road width, are we allowed or could we calculate the area in green there, meaning the shoulder, if it is flat, is that shoulder flat? It looks like it is to some degree, but it also looks like it has a slope to it. I was wondering if we could utilize that in our calculations for like emergency vehicles and such to get around. and maybe not have the roadways quite as wide. Just an engineering type question, and whether, you know, it specifies whether it has to be the same surface or it can be a varied surface.
It defines it as a travel lane, which is a consistent surface. The 6-foot shoulder is meant for, you know, if an emergency vehicle needs to pass, or if somebody gets a flat tire, they need to pull off to the side. So it is meant for vehicles to park there temporarily if needed. It's also meant to provide a buffer to things like a 1 to 4 slope where you have your ditch. So the shoulder is more of a buffer and an occasional use feature that the Green Book also requires. But when the Green Book requires a 9-foot minimum lane width, they define it as the travel lane width.
Hal, if you can you go ahead and share your screen? We have somebody that's on the chat box that is questioning the fact that that is not true. So if you can bring up the Florida Green Book standard that indicates the 9-foot travel lane minimum width for a dirt roadway.
Sure. Victor, if you could please stop sharing, then I can share. Thank you. So I'll skip to the cover page. And this is, it has a really long name. It's the FDOT Manual of Uniform Minimum Standards for Design, Construction, and Maintenance for Streets and Highways, commonly known as the Florida Green Book. So this is the manual that we use for designs within public rights-of-way. There is a table in there, table 3-10, minimum lane widths within there. And so to meet the criteria for that, you are a local road, it is rural, less than 400 trips a day, less than 45 miles an hour, and per this manual, it is 9-foot minimum for the lane widths. So this is for travel lanes, and it doesn't apply to turn lanes as well. So that is the 9-foot guideline.
Al, can you also go over the shoulders while we're in this section, please?
Sure.
Minimum with shoulders for the mayor's question.
So the Green Book also defines that. So it starts off by saying that since the function of the shoulders provide an emergency storage or travel path, the desirable width for all shoulders should have at least 10 feet. But it says where economic or practical constraints are severe, it is permissible but not desirable to reduce the shoulder width. Outside shoulders shall be provided on all streets and highways with open drainage and should be at least 6 foot wide. So that's where we get the criteria for the 6 foot wide adjacent to shoulders. So I understand the desire to keep the roads that they are, to keep them narrow, but in order to meet these published standards that are applicable for public rights-of-way, they are supposed to be 18 feet wide for 2 9-foot travel lanes and 6-foot shoulders that would be sodded.
And Mayor, we had a comment from Brandy in the chat box. I'm not sure if she wanted to go ahead and elaborate on that.
Brandy, that's fine. Would you like to speak now?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, so last year when this whole project started and we started talking about this green standard, I read the entire thing and I reached out to the state and I talked with a woman at length, and I can provide her information, and she even sent me some emails and stuff regarding specifics to that. And I was told by her, and she was one of the high level people in charge, that that is only true that we have to meet that standard if we're doing a substantial improvement to our roads. And it would have to be, because I explained to her, she was up in Tallahassee, so I had to explain to her that, you know, our town is in fact dirt roads. She not only told me that we do not have to meet that standard unless we're paving, as long as we're keeping dirt roads, we do not have to meet that minimum standard of a width for shoulder or road right-of-way of 9 foot in either direction. She also told me a couple of examples that our town could use that were based around Tallahassee and a couple of other areas where they didn't have to do that, because they did have a town with these major county roads that were dirt, that they wanted to maintain their tree line on either side, and all their dirt roads, and they were able to do that, and they had stormwater projects and managed to do all of it without widening the roads. And it is not a standard that has to be met for our town unless we are paving, which we are not. And I'm on record saying this a year ago, and it was just, you know, ignored, but it's true. And I think someone really needs to reach out to her instead of us just going along with, well, this is supposedly the standard, because there are different sets of standards, whether a road is paved or not in this state.
Thank you, Brandy. Your address for the record, even I think I can recite it, but.
Yeah, that's right. 835 Oakdale Street, Windermere, Florida. And it'll take me a little bit to get those records. I'm not in the state at the moment, but.
Thank you, Brandy.
Yep.
Further comment on forest from the public. Mr. Withers.
Just a question, and that is, are all the swales connected by a pipe? And the second question is, will there be standing water in them that will percolate like Richard Gonzalez talked about when the mild rain? In other words, is there going to be any water standing in the bottom of those ditches that'll percolate through so it doesn't move down the pipe system? And are all the ditches connected by a pipe? That's my questions.
Sure. Victor, I'm gonna stop sharing. If you could share your construction plans. And the answer is yes, all the ditches are connected via those side drains. You see on the screen right there, S3, S4, S5, S6, S11. So yes, we are connecting all those as far as, as far as the outfall over to First. And as far as the ditches, Victor, you can extend, but they will be designed for a certain storm event. There will be water in the ditches during the storm, but they will both percolate and will also travel through the pipes to the outfall.
Thank you.
And you can expand on that, Victor, if you need to.
Yeah, I think we're gonna provide positive grading on the swales connected to side drains. At some DBIs, at ditch bottom inlets, graded inlets, you may see them rise a little bit from the top. That's just a standard, just to be able to hold the first sediment transport before it gets into the pipe system, and be able to maintain it in the swale instead of inside the pipe. But you will see, inlets will rise about 4 to 5 inches. 4 to 6 inches, but as far as the swell system and the pipes that you see connecting underneath the driveways, it will have a positive grading. Basically, it will hold water when the storm is there, but as soon as the storm comes down, it's supposed to go downstream to the system downstream.
So Victor, along those lines, I actually sent a picture to Robert and to Scott before we even got the heavier rains that we just received via the hurricanes, showing the karstens and our house and how the water does stay still without even reaching the grass section. I will say that given the pictures that you're showing and the drawings that you're showing, that tree that you're mentioning that you may discuss with your arborist, there is no way that tree is going to be saved, given that it's so close to the road as it is. Also, what you're saying, if I'm understanding you correctly, every time that you do any type of reform on our streets, are you going to bring the standard to 18 feet? Because that does not make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, so the typical section right now shows 18 feet. This is the concept based on minimum standards for a road that needed some upgrading on the profile and provide proper geometry. If we have, direction on, as far as, the comments that we receive, it's some discussion we're going to have with the town. I think, Robert, do you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've said it several times about the reasoning for the 9 feet. It's up to town council whether or not they want to maintain a typical section of 9 feet. for the reasons that we articulated. And again, we can try to reduce areas in order to protect trees, and we'll try to do as much as possible. But from here on out, again, council, if we keep going back and forth with question, answer, it's going to be hard for me to document times of each person. Again, we're in concept. When we get closer to design, we can do the same that we did for Butler, West 2nd. And what we're doing with Bessie is have individual Zoom calls with those residents along that route when we get further into the design process.
All right. So at this point, council, any discussion? Questions? Mr. Martini.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I have a question regarding the width of the travel lanes. What if this is a one-way street? Just hypothetically, not necessarily this one, but if we had a one-way street, would that still have to be 18 feet, or could it be 9 feet? Because there's a very small amount of homes here, and they could easily exit at first, come in off a second, exit at first. And then also, as far as the trees that are impacted, are there other trees? Is there a certain minimum size that the trees are considered? Because I'm looking at the satellite view of forest, and it seems like there's several smaller trees that are not indicated whether they would be impacted or not on the plans here. So are there smaller trees that would be cut down or taken out? And lastly, a question about the outfall into Wauseon Bay. One of the previous meetings that we had, there was some talk about water at the north end of Forest exiting into Wauseon Bay, overflow, I guess, not sure.
I'd probably defer to Hal on question one as far as, the travel lane would be a travel lane. So if you're doing a one way, I guess the minimum standard would be 9 feet. But again, I would have to.
Right, I would, so if you do a one-way street, even if it's one way, you are supposed to accommodate emergency vehicles. So you would need more like a 15-foot width, which is what you kind of have now. So if you were to designate this as a one-way street, we could possibly keep the width that you have now, somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 feet, because you do have to plan for emergency vehicles, because as you know, emergency vehicles could use up both lanes if they needed to. So that would be my recommendation on that.
And then for the second question relative to when you're doing a site survey, I don't believe they do any trees that are less than 8 dBH.
I think it's 4, Robert. Let me, I'll have to double check the scope, but typically, and this is from memory, that our surveyor picks up trees with DBHs of greater than 4 inches.
And that still doesn't describe the type and species of those trees, correct?
Actually, not all the levels are turned on. So the surveyor does their best to identify the tree type, but we go out there and we take a look at it. And I know the town has a certified arborist, so we would go out there and verify those tree types, that the surveyor has on their files.
Okay, so I mean, same principle that we had when we're looking at the 6th Avenue Main Street sidewalk program, where the majority of the trees were actually either invasives or.
Angela with his iPhone.
Stephen, I don't want to.
I'm sorry.
I don't think we want to hear that conversation, but anyway, again, once we get further into the design, we can actually identify what types of trees they are. What may look like a large tree could be either a camphor, some sort of invasive, or something else. But when we get further into design, we'll make sure I have an arborist take a look at that, and including some other vegetation as well. I know that's going to be discussed in the 7th stormwater improvement as well, as far as vegetation that people have planted within the actual right-of-way. And then your Wauseon Bay question, I'd have to defer to Victor Scott or Hal.
Sure. I'll start, and Victor, you can build on it. Victor, could you go to the outfall near first? So right now, on the north side of First, there is a swale that leads to like a V control structure that overtops and then goes into the bay. We looked at this, and we're looking at, Victor, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're looking at kind of regrading that swale to provide a little bit more capacity, because that swale does get flooded during high storm events. Is that correct?
Yeah, we're more looking at you know, reestablishing the capacity that was originally designed for, and armor it, so we don't have to you know, we don't have to, you know, deal with, you know, erosion and washouts. The structure itself needs to be rehabilitated. It's a kind of settling. So we're looking at the original design of these outfall system, and we're gonna bring it back to those proper elevations, proper capacity, and armoring.
Which item are we looking at on the screen here? Which number?
We're looking at, let me see if I can, it's probably better if I can do a shape here. Is this area right here.
Okay.
There's a swell system right here, and it outfalls into a concrete weir.
Okay, thank you.
There was also a question from Jeff desiring to know where the low point is of the system. I believe it's right about in there somewhere, but just for clarification and.
Yeah, I'd like to speak. I just can't find the raise your hand icon.
All right, Jeff, we're going to consider your hand raised real quick here.
All right. So yeah, I had a couple questions. Yeah, one being the low point. I think you answered that. So if we go back to the other screen on 2nd Avenue, where Sarah was talking about if you guys put the swales in, so you have the pipes going under her driveway, and then, so correct me if I'm wrong, all that water is going to go north, and then is it going to end at the property on Forest and First in that retention area, or is it going to continue down First Avenue into another retention area and then out? And then additionally, is this swale system going to be connected to the old French drain system, or are these going to be two totally separate systems? And if they're separate systems, then are you guys going to come back and maintain the French drain system? Because it seems to clog up very frequently. And what happens when it clogs up is it's not percolating down. So all of it is going to my property, which is 219 and 212 First Avenue. Oh, and one last question is, who owns the seawall that's located on my property that's sinking?
Yeah,
that is all.
The question about the water coming down from 2nd and going into this, the last part of the system of Forest, it is currently designed to continue using a 2-pipe system. The existing pipe system is a 24-inch pipe and an 18-inch pipe here. So we're going to continue connecting to that system. Right now we're showing, again, just like we did with the shapes, what we, basically the worst case scenario, we have a pipe connecting, upgrading a pipe at a 15-inch pipe here, and a pipe system right along the right away here. But again, we are, as we tighten up the model, we're going to try to be at least intrusive as we can along First because we have the connectivity to a much larger system there. So
Yeah, and
basically,
I'm not
it's
talking
gonna,
about
Victor,
non-intrusive.
Victor, can you go a little farther north and show him where the overflow is with the weir structure? Because I think that's what Jeff's asking.
this is
Jeff,
forest now? Is that
keep going down. Yeah, where the overflow is.
This is the basin, the lake area. This is forest right now. We're looking
Yes,
northeast up. Jeff, is this the location where you're?
Yeah, where the two docks are with the boat parked, and then there's a little star, looks like a tree. There's outfalls right there.
Correct. Yeah. So here the improvement here is that we're gonna correct the type of the erosion that is happening by bringing it back to the original design grades and armor it. We're gonna be using either based on discussions that are coming soon, either articulated block or matting to basically armor this area. It will still be grassed up, but to be able to take any kind of runoff that is currently washing out and also impacting the control structure. Right now.
So yeah, so right inside the road, there's a catch basin or a grade on the road just south of where the boat is at the dock, located in the center of the road. You can see it on the aerial. So what water does, and I pointed this out, is that it collects a little bit to the west of that drain culvert. It never goes in the culvert because the road's not high right there, and it drains right down. It saturates that whole area, and that whole area fills it with water, and then it dries out. Fills it with water, dries out. And what's happening is that seawall that's right where the little hand-drawn asterisk is, it's starting to crack and sink. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
In 2 years, we have vertical changes of about 1.5 inches.
Yeah,
Let me hop in there.
Yeah.
Because that's the area you, I, and Hal talked about. And that's what Jeff, he's talking about when we're going to armament or reinforce that back berm, which is kind of that seawall and so forth, because we've seen some failures around the outfall, the water's come up. So we're going to be looking into that area a little more deeper. So we should have something better for it at the final design.
Okay, do I have a say into what goes into that seawall, or is that seawall in the right of way, or does that belong to me?
Well, let's get back with you on that. Let me verify that right off the top of my head, but absolutely, we always ask for input like we're doing here. Another thing that I want to hop in and clarify, I've heard it a couple times today. Both systems will be operational. They are on a bi-yearly cleaning schedule. Actually, the crews were out there within the last 14 days out of coincidence, going through the whole system again. We saw a lot less than we saw back in the December area. So like I say, they go through there and back out that entire system. So it is being maintained where it won't get totally clogged or anything like that. So it's going to be a usable system just like everything in town.
Thank you, sir. I want to bring this back to council discussion. So Councilperson Martini had some questions and comments. Any further questions, comments from council?
Just a sec. Hello, can anybody hear me? Hello?
Yes, Teresa, I'm trying to get some council feedback, please.
Okay, I was understood that we were allowed to speak, and I haven't been allowed to speak before the council yet. I'd like to specifically address the Forest Avenue, 7th and Forest, where the 1887 Schoolhouse National Register Historic Site is.
We're not, Teresa, we're not on that topic yet.
Okay.
You wanted to defer, okay? Is that accurate, or do you want to speak now?
Okay, that's fine.
Okay. Let us
to
get
go to
through
the
one at a
council.
time here. Thank you. Council, any further comment, discussions, or questions regarding the Forest Avenue portion of this?
I do.
Councilperson McKinley, please.
You know, we talk about concept plans and green book, and we've got the manual for uniform control of traffic control devices, and those are guidelines. When we widen these roads and install 18 foot of travel lane, we're opening this thing up, and if you think we've had problems with cut through traffic before, hang on to your hat, because it's going to get worse. And just looking at it in my non-engineering brain, the width of a road has zero to do with stormwater. It can be 5 foot road, it can be a 30 foot road. The method of controlling the stormwater is the same. And we're looking at taking a 60-foot section along Forest Avenue, and I think that is just absolutely pitiful that we would even present something like that to the residents. And for staff to be telling residents that we have 60 feet we can take, I believe that's a council decision, not a staff decision. And I would rather staff not be telling residents that we are going to take a 60-foot width, which is exactly what we're looking at here when you throw in the ditches and everything else. I think a large part of our problem is that we're not maintaining what we've already had. And if you want to look at it, you can look right outside my house here on 6th Avenue. I have dirt piled up, and the drainage swell in my yard means nothing unless it runs down my driveway, because the dirt is not being knocked back down so that the rainwater can go off the edges of the road. That's also on the other side of 6th Avenue, directly across from me. And I ask anybody, just drive along there and take a look at it. And if you think water can get over those humps, then you're better than me. So the typical thing we saw there at Oakdale and 9th is great if it's maintained. If the water can run off the road into that ditch, that's great. But if it's not being maintained, it won't. And you drive around town, you see the culverts. There's one at Oakdale and 6th that is just full of dirt. We're not doing anything with it. And that's what bothers me, is if we're not maintaining what we have, what was designed earlier, whether it was accurate or not, if we're not maintaining it, then what makes me or any other resident of this town think that we're going to maintain this system? It doesn't make sense. So as far as widening any of the roads, we're not required to widen the roads. They're existing roads. If we don't do anything to those roads, we don't have to do anything to them. We do have to maintain the stormwater. And when we get into engineering, walk along First Avenue and you can see an engineering feat that destroyed a road. It's pitiful what's going on. And I think the residents of this town have said enough that they want dirt roads. They don't like to cut through traffic. And I think it's our job as council to represent the residents of this town. We're not here to provide an engineering firm with an endless supply of money and keep engineering. There's no need in every road in this town taking up the entire 60-foot right of way, and we make adjustments as needed. What we need for council is a reasonable solution to a problem, not something that takes up the whole 60 foot and a 15-foot ditch. You serious? I just, I know I've lived around dirt roads all my life and I've never seen anything like this. And I apologize for being emotional about this, but I've seen enough. And I think it's time that we all get on the same sheet of music and we start moving forward to resolve some of the problems, rather than building fires like they did up at the Four Corners. show you a monstrosity and then regulate to something else. We don't have time to be sitting here dickering about the width of a road. The road is what it is. I've driven a fire truck, and there's not one road in this town that I can't get down with a fire truck. So there's been no instance, and I'd asked this question before, how many times has an emergency vehicle not been able to get to a place? The answer was none, other than a tree being down across the road. And we're not going to take out all the trees. So whether a tree is invasive or not, we don't have to take it out. I'd like to see us do some maintenance on what we have, develop a plan on how to maintain what we have, rather than sitting here throwing hundreds of thousands of dollars or tens of thousands of dollars into something that is going to cost us more money. We don't have an endless bank account. Here we're going to lay out a road different than what it is because we want to widen the whole thing to 60 foot. Come on. I think we can do better than this as a town and serving the residents, and that's what I'd like to see.
Mayor, if I may respond.
Absolutely.
Yes, go ahead, Robert. That's fine.
Again, our jobs is to show you what the potential impacts may be. And I repeat that, maybe, and I think Victor and Hal have made it abundantly clear that these concepts, once we get into final design, can and probably will be reduced. Several months ago, you stated again, you have issues with the maintenance of the roadways. Well, again, as I said before, we have been consistently inconsistent with the way that we have done road projects in the past. Some have actually resulted in litigation because they are not engineered, because they are done haphazardly. And with the fact that you have all these haphazardly projects that have been completed without an engineer's stamp of approval or having as-built of those that include how to maintain those areas, it creates a very hardship on public works. So that's why we took that direction, again, stating from you that you have these different manuals from other municipalities. What those municipalities showed is they have typical sections and they showed you how to maintain those typical sections. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to create typical sections that we're able to maintain in perpetuity without having to go to a manual or anything else because everything is the same. Some of the roads in town are 20 foot wide. We're looking at reducing those to the 18 foot, which is the minimum width. We could argue back and forth whether that 3 foot of difference between the 15 that's there and the 18 that's going to be replacing that 15 is going to generate an excessive amount of traffic or cut through traffic that isn't there already. We can go through that all the time. But what we were looking at doing, and based on council's direction, since you wanted to maintain those dirt roadways, was to come back with a typical section that we're able to, again, we're coming back with a, we're trying to get it down to that 9 foot width for a travel lane and trying to reduce the amount of impacts as much as possible. But we wouldn't be doing our job without showing you guys what the potential impacts may be, if we were to go ahead and do this. Now, even with the 9 foot, it could potentially impact 15 feet or 14 foot on one side. But I'm not going to show somebody 4 feet and then have to come back and say, I'm sorry, it's got to be, 12 feet. But we want to make sure that there's consistency throughout town on not only the typical sections and how stormwater is dealt with, that also assists us with the repair, maintenance, and operations of those roadways, which will ultimately save us money. So yes, you're paying money up front for the designs, but it'll save you money in the long run.
Also, I think that it is our role here that if we desire to deviate from the specifications or the width or anything like that, that we need to give, clear cut marching orders to staff so they can pass that along to the engineers, and then they can work within those parameters. The challenge is when you do that, obviously if you need to carry a certain volume of water, you're going to end up with a deeper ditch that's harder to maintain, or a different solution, just so we all know that going in. There's give and take in all these projects. I understand the concern about the width of the road. I can also tell you that the narrowest road we have in town is Ridgewood, and it has one of the greatest cut through problems. You know, sometimes it's location more than width, but certainly we can talk about width. I don't think that everyone wants 20-foot roads. I think that's been made pretty clear. So we need to give those clear-cut directions to the engineers and to staff, so we can get something that's a little closer to at least what it seems like folks want to see. So at this point, I'd like to continue on with council comment.
Okay.
Hey, Jim, do you mind if I chime in a little bit on Bob's comment?
That's fine, John. Go ahead, and then we'll come back to Bob. And
I don't want to interrupt the meeting or anything, but I do think it's important because I understand Bob's perspective because he's representing a lot of people in our town.
Sure.
But I also understand that we've set a high precedent in this town. We said we wanted dirt roads and we want to maintain them and we want to maintain the charm of our town. And I live in this town and I'm an engineer for this town. And so I think it's important that as we begin to understand how do we give Robert and Scott an opportunity to really just formulate a plan for a basic principle of what we are getting ready to do. And we'll be respectful to trees and we'll be respectful to neighbors and all the other stuff. But at the end of the day, we have to maintain public access. We have to maintain first responders. We have to maintain all that stuff. And in addition to that, we also have to maintain stormwater. And we made the decision as a council to stay with dirt roads.
Yes.
But we also made the decision that we wanted to protect our lakes. And so we have a huge, arduous decision that we made as a town to protect our lakes, keep our roads dirt, keep the charm, and also design roads that are publicly safe. And so we have to take all those precedents that we've set on our engineers to determine a plan. And, you know, is 20 feet right? No, maybe not. And Robert and I have talked today and, you know, we'll narrow it down to 16 feet. We'll look at where we are. We'll adjust the plan accordingly to make sure that it works with the neighbors and the trees and all the other stuff. And that's key, right? But we as a town made a decision to hold true to who we are, and we want dirt roads. I'm not saying that's a good decision or a bad decision. I'm saying that's the decision we made. And so we've set a high bar for Robert and for Scott and our engineers. And so we're trying to come up with plans that save the lakes, keep the residents safe, but yes, still maintain their character. Those are 3 high bars that we have to do. And so that's what we're working on. And so I just felt after listening to all the conversations tonight, that's the precipice and the design basis that we go on every single day, that we're building roads with Howe, Kimley Horn, and all the other folks. So I just want you to know that we are cognizant of that. I'm in the day-to-day fray with Scott and Robert every day to ensure that we're maintaining the character and the charm of our town. But yet I have to answer the call to all the stuff the council has put on us. And so that's my soliloquy tonight, and sorry.
No, John, that's good perspective. And that is what we talked about when we made the decision. And I remember saying this very clearly, that when we made the decision not to pave, which we totally understand and appreciate and support, with that comes other challenges when it comes to the control of water. It's clearly easier. It's clearly easier to pave and do curb and gutter and be on your way. Much easier.
And so when we made the decision that we had to go with dirt roads, we also made the decision that ultimately we're going to have to build shoulders on those roads, because you can't build dirt roads and bring sod to the edge of the dirt roads because the water will never run off. And so what we have to do is harden shoulders, keep dirt roads, and allow water to seep into the swales that we do. And, you know, we're a town that doesn't have a lot of retention. Our only retention is within our right-of-ways. And that's what saves the lakes, right? How do you solve the water problem? because when you have runoff coming off of dirt roads, it's chocolate milk. It's not a good thing. We don't want high suspended solids in our lake. So the only way we can do that is through treatment trains and swales and all this other stuff. And so what does that mean? It broadens our right of way. It broadens our road use. It broadens everything that we've done in our town to protect our lakes, because our lakes are what make this town a beautiful thing. And so
I could not agree with you more. That's exactly what we want to do. However, when we look at a map of this town, the roads that go to the lake are very limited. We have Fernwood Park. We have East Avenue that goes along there. We have a portion of 7th Avenue that goes into Johnson Park. We have Lake Street. Other than that, into the lakes is all private property, and we have swales and First Avenue, which that's a different situation altogether. But whether
it's really still, Bob, at the end of the day, it's protecting.
Excuse me.
Yeah, but
when we widen the roads, we increase the speed that people will be traveling at through these residential areas. That's number one. So I am against any widening of the roads. It has nothing to do with water retention, but to utilize 42 feet along each roadway for water retention, to me, is absolutely ridiculous. We can get much less than that. We do not have to take the entire 60-foot right of way.
Bob, but I'm not legislating for the wide of the right of way. What I'm legislating for tonight is about being judicious about our community, being judicious about our neighborhoods. And even Robert mentioned that tonight, that we're not talking about taking that entire right of way and 60 feet and expanding it out. We want to be judicious about the way that we approach our engineering and our technology and the way that we do this. But at the end of the day, we have two things that we're trying to do, right? We're trying to protect our flooding and we're trying to protect our lakes. And if we can do those two things and we can still maintain the character and the charm of our town, then man, we nailed it. And so that's where this night and everything we're doing tonight, we're just out here tonight talking about these are designs. We have an engineer on record. And so part of the process is to refine our engineer to the needs of our town, but at the same time, understand how do we protect our lakes? How do we protect flooding? How do we protect all these things that are going on? And so that's really the purpose of what I thought tonight was about. And I think I think Robert gets that and Scott gets that. And I hope they give me the thumbs up on that conversation. At the end of the day, we as town council, we as mayor, and we as everybody else and engineers and people that live in this town, we want to protect the beauty in the way that we are, but we also have to protect our lakes. And we've set a precedent that those dirt roads are mandatory. And so now we have engineers that are trying to figure out how to make that happen.
Well, if an engineer needs 42 foot of right of way to make that happen, then maybe we need to look at a different engineer.
I'm not saying that's the answer. And you and I are in agreement on that.
Is we're throwing up in front of the residents worst case scenario. And that's what irritates me. Why don't we take what we have, do a reasonable design on the thing and say, look, here's what we can get by with. Not some monstrosity out here. I'd rather see what is a workable thing, considering the trees, and then we can get into the final design, and I understand all that. But to throw out a 60-foot right-of-way after staff has told residents that we can take, or we're going to take the whole 60-foot right-of-way, creates a problem for me. And
I understand that. The beauty of tonight is for us to be able to assess that and come back. And even Robert and I had that conversation today. And so, we have to go back, and I'll let Robert chime in on that one.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any staff member telling anybody that we are utilizing the entire 60 feet.
Okay. That wasn't the intent.
I'm not aware of anybody.
I'll have that discussion with you later then, individually, and I'll tell you where it happened.
Okay, no problem. I mean, yeah, the concept utilizes the entire 60 feet, but if anybody has said that, they were misspoken.
Okay.
And for the purposes of the record, as we sit here tonight, and that is what truly counts as we make decisions and inform ourselves for a vote or whatever we decide how we want to move forward. The purpose of this is to do just that, to come away with something that makes sense and that we can agree is a workable compromise and solution. So I want us to be better. So let's continue on that path. Thank you, Bob. I think we know exactly your thoughts, and I appreciate that. Council, any additional comment? I saw some of you guys nodding, and I'd like to hear your thoughts.
Okay, I'll speak up.
Councilperson Williams, thank you.
Thank you. I'm with Bob on the road widening. You know, if we want to come up with a standard width, let's look at all the roads and come up with a standard. Maybe it's 15 feet, maybe it is 18 feet. I don't know. But, you know, the road has nothing to do with the stormwater. But if we can start and say, okay, these are what our roads look like now, because that's what everybody wants to keep. They want to keep the characteristics of our road. So if it's a 15-foot road, that's what we should be basing our road off of, and then design out from that for the stormwater. I understand this is always, you know, they're going to give us the worst case scenario. I spent 2 hours today up and down 7th and Butler, and I was over on Forest and First all afternoon, looking at where water's been running, who isn't keeping their water on their own property, things like that, and just going, okay, where's the water coming from that's creating some of the hazards? My one question on the Forest Street is, we've got all the culverts, and this is showing me these culverts are going to be in the middle of the ditch now. How's that going to work? I mean, they're raised to start with to keep the dirt out, but now we're talking about leaving them in the middle of the ditch. That's kind of where the road's gotten wider, so I can see some of them on the edge of the road now. Some of them are showing up in the ditch. How are we going to maintain both systems?
Yeah, let me, I'm going to switch to the one sheet.
So those side drains will be similar to the pictures I showed you. They will be set at the bottom of the ditch, and so it will be effective in conveying the ditch, with the caveat that it does have to be maintained. If the ditch starts getting silted and those pipes get silted up, the ditch will have to be re-scraped and the pipes will have to be desilted. So it will work as designed, but maintenance will still have to occur in order for those pipes to continually function. But you know, with the closed drainage system and the French drains that are currently not working very well, we went with an option of the open system to supplement that, so that you can visually see when those ditches need to be regraded in order to establish that. And we also plan on putting erosion mats on the ditches so you don't have erosion issues as well. And Victor, you can expand on that.
Okay, I understand that. I'm having a hard time chewing on, we're asking residents to have, okay, we're going to do an open ditch in your front yard, and we're going to leave culverts in there too. It's just not a whole lot of room for landscaping. And
Councilman Williams, if I may.
Yes, sir.
The culvert pipes are under the driveways. They're just driveway pipes.
Okay.
So it's just allowing people to, so the pipes aren't just out in the middle of the stall system.
I understand that, but I'm talking about the current grates that are there. Like if you look at the Karstens and the Lopez and their neighbors across the street, they've got 3 by 4 foot drains. That is now where the ditch is going to be. Or it's in the road if we move the road and make it wider.
Yes, sir. I understand that. And that is part of the retention system, but I get your point. I just wanted to clarify the driveway pipe.
No, I understood the driveway culverts.
Okay.
And, you know, we've got them all over town, and that's understandable. I'm just trying to wrap my head around looking some people in the face going, hey, you know, this is the best we can do. when right now they've got big culverts in their front yard. Some people have two. And now we're going to go, okay, hold on. Let's dig out 8 more feet and make a slight ditch in the yard too, to add to it.
Understood.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilperson Williams. Councilperson Sapp or Councilperson Andrew?
For once, I don't have anything, Mayor. I've talked with Robert at length about this and then with several residents. So I'm still listening and hearing everyone's comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilperson Andrew. Councilperson Sapp.
Let me try to get through this because my internet is very unstable right now. I don't want to get too much in the weeds with a foot here, foot there, because this is a design. This is exactly what council 6 months or whatever ago asked staff and the engineers to put together, was typical sections or designs. And what I had said during that time and everybody agreed on, part of this plan would to have a maintenance plan that goes along with it, because currently the town does not have one. Scott's not going to be here forever. We need some sort of handbook or direction that can be passed down from employee to employee. People keep going on about this Elmer fellow and such, but he's not around anymore. So I mean, we need something that is black and white, similar to what Councilperson McKinley had given staff from another municipality of how to maintain those roads. So I do believe this is all part of the exercise, that we've given direction for. I think what I would like to see, and whether that's shrinking the roads or moving around, is to allow some sort of area. I know we don't like to plant on the right of ways, but to allow some sort of landscape buffers, or to be able to replant trees and things like that. And I know we have to be mindful of utilities and such. So I would imagine some sort of landscape delineation would be on the outside, of that. So as we go through this design process, I would like to make sure that there's some sort of landscaping that's integrated in there. And then also you'd put on there that there was shoulder gutters, and I'm curious if those could be used to circumvent some of the trees, where we split up ditches, put in those type of gutters, where we're not putting ditches or having to remove trees to put ditches. Is that possible?
Yes, that is possible. So in areas where we're looking to preserve a tree, it is possible to have a run of shoulder gutter with like a ditch inlet, an inlet in the shoulder gutter, in lieu of a ditch for short periods of runs.
Yeah, so we were trying to minimize the use of shoulder gutter only when we see very little offsite coming. When we have a considerable amount of flow, we try to avoid having that concrete dirt transition that can get scoured and can get washed out. And so, for example, in this area that where we have proposed, really all we have is, to half or 2/3 of the property draining to it, with not that much runoff. Where in the other side, we have quite a bit of flow and water coming to us.
And maybe this is a question when we get more into design, but my biggest concern through the whole process is, maintenance, of course. Are there markers that would be placed there, or some sorts of, I don't know what I'm looking for, but something to be able to show where a grading is supposed to be, at what point these swales are supposed to be dug out, what that gradient's supposed to look like, so on and so forth. A lot of these roads have gotten smaller. I can say where my house is on 12th, simply because grass has grown into the road 2 to 3 feet in some areas, and therefore shrinking the road, when in turn that should be probably graded out, or a different type of grass used, or some sort of other application to keep the landscaping or vegetation from shrinking the road size. And also that comes with that, it diverts water a different direction, as we're seeing in other parts of town.
Let me answer that. One of the recommendations that came out of the original study was to, provide control points to be able to provide that positive drainage for positive grading, especially in open swells. So once we get into plans and details, one thing is, that armoring to a certain elevation on critical points along the profile of the ditches will allow, the town to come back and dig up to that elevation, because it would be, cells there that would be set at an elevation that they come back and dig to, instead of, because dirt just keeps going and the elevation of the ditch could raise 6 inches. But because we provided those, not berms, but ditch pavement, basically, that will have cells where grass can still grow, but it also provides an elevation that they come back and dig to, later on when, siltation occurs. But that will be part
Okay,
of
so
more of
there will
the
be some
detailing.
So there'll be some sort of barrier in there that you could, you can get a backhoe in there or whatever the utility is to be able to dig it out, and where the original grade was.
Correct. And some critical points is whenever there's a potential hump where if they get silted out, it could back up water. That's where we will place that, and it will be part of the plans. It will have an elevation, but that, again, that's more the detail. Once we move forward to design. And then one thing that I've looked at is, by modeling these, we have flows, we have velocities, and it helps us determine the proper lining of the swells. Grass can take up to some velocity. We move to more armoring, and there's a lot of products that we work with that provide that more better stabilization, even before it, right at the installation point or later on with different products. So, so by studying the area, also we provide what kind of lining these open swells need. At the end, they all look like grass, but they may have more underneath than what we see in the typical.
And this is probably a question for Hal. Have you gone around all of the dirt streets and gathered a median or a typical width throughout town?
We have not. We have been focusing on
the road.
Yeah, we have not been all through the town to gather information. We've been focused on Bessie, Butler, 9th, and Forest and First. So we've reviewed those roads. But I personally have not gone out and looked at the widths of all the roads to get an average median width.
That's all I have for now, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilperson Sepp. I appreciate that.
Mayor, if I could just say one statement. I know for a lot
Certainly.
of people that hopefully you guys can hear me. I know for a lot of people that are just first time joining a town council meeting, first time joining a Zoom meeting, it may sound adversarial between staff, council, residents, stuff like that. But that's not what the intent is. The intent is, we need to talk these things through, debate, discuss, so we can come to some sort of understanding of not only what town council wants, but what the residents want, and that staff gets clear direction from all parties that here's how we want to move forward. Whether it's going to remain inconsistent with the widths of the right-of-ways, whether we just take care of the stormwater, not even address the roadways. That's why we're here to listen to you guys and the feedback. But if it seems adversarial, it's not meant to be like that. It is, again, trying to discuss, debate, and then come up with some sort of plan so staff has an opportunity to move forward. So if this is your first time attending one of these meetings, please don't get that feeling that they're contentious and whatnot. We're here to listen, and we're here to adapt as it may be.
So thank you, Robert. And hey, I've participated in some adversarial council meetings. This is not one of them. So, you know, this is tough stuff, right? And I mean, it's hard to do it in this format sometimes, but, you know, really it is about making sure we get all the data and all the information and hear from everybody that we possibly can. So I'm gonna take a stab at this one, and I may be off, all right? But what I'm hearing is that we as a council and we as a community are looking for an alternative solution to what is in front of us that is significantly narrower, knowing that may tweak how the water is carried. The other key comment that I hear here, is that proper?
Yeah.
That I have heard is that we 100% need to invest and spend time in a maintenance plan that we can reference as being followed and being specific to those projects throughout town, which require continual maintenance. Again, with the caveat knowing that once we have that, we have to utilize that, maintain that, and we may have to make investments in that to get to where we want to go. But that is probably a good idea and has been discussed previously. So that's a side note. But what I'm looking for from council is if we go away from the 20-foot width of the road and go to a 16-foot max roadway with a drainage solution that is about half of this, if that's doable. But I mean, is that what I'm hearing from council and from residents? That's what I want to know, council. Go ahead.
Well, Mayor, real quick, you know, it would have to be, do you want us to meet minimal standards by the Florida Department of Highway following the Green Book, or do you want us to deviate that and do lesser as far as a right-of-way width?
Okay.
If we deviate, then, I mean, we have that possibility, but with the understanding that we may be losing out on grants and we're going to have to self-fund a lot of these projects. But as others have said, yes, there's no reason why we can't maintain the widths that are currently there, but you have to understand what you're losing out as far as a maintenance program because of the different widths and losing out on money. So if you want us to deviate from the minimal standards, then we can do so. But we just need that direction from council to not follow industry-wide practices or engineering principles.
So Robert, that's an excellent point, and I appreciate that point. Thank you. So I have a couple thoughts on that, and council can weigh in as well. I believe that for this particular project, being a self-funded project, is that going to impact the other grant-funded projects that we're talking about at Butler and down at Lake Bessie?
No, those designs are reviewed by FEMA, the same as West 2nd Avenue, and then they put their stamp on it, and then it goes to construction phase 2, but the deliverable has to be approved by FEMA.
So it goes to FEMA, it goes to project formulation, then to the CRC for all of that review, right? Okay, correct. But this does not. So, okay, so we are under that understanding. So with that caveat, for this project, am I reading council correctly?
Yes.
Councilperson Bob, thank you. Councilperson Martini? I'm seeing a nod. Can you tell? Yes, yeah. Okay. Councilperson Ander?
I do have a question though that just occurred. So to have a maintenance program, do we actually absolutely have to have the same typical section throughout town, or can we have a maintenance program and a manual that includes different widths so that town public works staff can still maintain sections that deviate or are different, but we have more than one typical section? We have typical section A, B, and C, and there are guidelines to maintain each of those. And we can select.
I think we need guidelines for each intersection because every place in our town is different.
So, and also,
But the goal was to create consistency so we could have a master maintenance plan for succession
I
planning.
understand that, but couldn't we still create that, but then not have it be an absolute where every single section throughout town has to be the same width, but we can have, you know, maybe 3 different that we can choose from in different areas, and then town staff is just aware of which particular section they have to use when they're maintaining that portion of roadway.
So let me suggest this. I'll say, Councilperson Anders, that I believe it could be customized. For the sake of our conversation tonight, if we focus here, and I know I brought this up, so yeah, that's on me. But we're obviously going to have some further conversation about the maintenance plan. My reflection was, I've heard this, I've heard it again, and I want to make sure that we act on it. So I will make that a responsibility that staff and myself and our roads folks, that we are going to work on having that. And that, of course, would come to council as well. So we'd have that opportunity for input and the customization that I think it needs, especially since we do have varied projects from varied eras and times that have occurred. So how about we come back to that for a deeper, further conversation to make sure we get what we want, if that's okay with you. And then as far as right now, am I interpreting your feel and your conversations with residents in terms of this particular project?
In a general sense, yes.
Okay, I like that. Very good. Councilperson Williams.
I'm good. Yes, I think you're on the right track.
Councilperson Sapp.
Yeah, I believe you're on the right track. I apologize. I've only caught part of it. I turned my video off to try to help with this internet issue.
Okay. And if I can clarify anything, let me know. But basically, we're talking about squeezing it down, not following the green book to a T, and you know, challenging our engineers to see if we can tighten this up, knowing that there may be some compromises that come with that as well. But you know, getting it out of the 60-foot range and more into the 42-foot range or something like that, including the road. So
yeah, I'm friendly to it. I mean, as a whole, you know, these concepts that we're looking at tonight, I think are a great starting point. And then knowing that many different parts of town are going to be different and may have to be modified accordingly, because we're going to go through the same conversation once we get down to 9th and Bessie, which are very narrow roads, or east, excuse me. So, you know, so I'm friendly to this, you know, these typical sections, but, you know, knowingly that, you know, project by project, it's going to vary. Because I do believe once we take a median, you know, measurement around town, we're going to be somewhere between, you know, that 15 to 18 foot mark for the width.
I think it's, yeah, I do think it's fair to say we're atypical. So we won't use that typical language there in terms of the section width. But I just want to make sure that for our purposes tonight, that we're giving our engineering team and our staff the clearest possible direction that we can. And that is clearly to narrow this up. That's what I'm hearing loud and clear, hearing it from council, I'm hearing it from residents, and even from staff in terms of saying like, hey, this is the max, you know, so obviously we can do our best to narrow it. And with some understanding that what we see next, it will be different, obviously, and it may have, you know, for volume purposes, it may have deeper culverts or something like that, but we'll have to kind of work our way through that as well. Okay.
This is Sarah Lopez with
Yes, Sarah.
Since you're asking the residents' opinion, I'd like to go ahead and jump in if you don't mind. So there was a comment made that there was not enough feedback provided to the engineers, and I would like to say that there was. So the maintenance program was discussed during the last meeting. We were also discussing where is the water coming from. That was not addressed. Keep the water from coming to the end of the street. That's still happening. you're putting the swells and the culverts in the Karstens and in front of my house, which is literally at the end of the street. We did discuss keeping the dirt roads. We also discussed the size of the road, it does not impact the street, the water. We did discuss that if it's paved, the water speed will actually increase. And we did also discuss the erosion control, which has not been discussed during this meeting. So I do think that a lot of guidance was provided during the last meeting, and none of those points were pretty much addressed. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. I will. I don't want to get in a back and forth on that, but I believe several of those items have been discussed and looked at in great deal. The culverts themselves have been, we have done maintenance and some things to make sure those culverts are as clear as possible. They're a bit challenging, but we will continue to work towards getting us where we need to be. The fact of the matter is that the basin and the low point of that entire basin is very close to that area, so that water is going to flow, and we're going to do our best to see what we can do to eliminate as much of the impacts as possible and keep that where it should be. All right, so now we're going to move to our next item on the agenda, and that is
Mayor,
yes.
real quick, just so we completely understand as staff.
Yes.
You want us to maintain the existing right-of-way as, not the right-of-way, but the roadway as is.
I did not. So what I asked is that we look at nothing wider than, I believe we used 16 feet.
I think it's 15 feet, the width right now.
Okay, so 16 feet and narrow that up quite a bit on the swale sides as well, to try to, compress and squeeze this into a more denser, concentrated and shorter width. Somewhere in the, I don't want to give a number because that's engineering it from the DS, and we don't want to do that. I'm trying to give guidance, which is saying what I'm asking the engineers to do is to squeeze it down as much as they can and bring it back to us and show us that. And we'll let them know. Is that fair?
That's
no?
fair. Our goal is always to make the impossible possible, so we will try to do what we can.
And I appreciate it. And I know, and listen, if you guys look at it and say it's impossible, then you just have to tell us it's impossible. You don't have to go do it all. If it can't be done, it can't be done. And then we'll look at it a different way. But I can also say that this is clearly what we're hearing. And let's see if it can be done. And
yes, sir.
Look at the ramifications of that. Now, in terms of as we move along on the agenda here, it is 8:17. We spent a lot of time on that project, and it's worthwhile, and we should do that. My hope is that some of this will benefit us in the next conversation. I also want to make it clear that I'm going to be a little more strict on public comment and time and the back and forth, just so we can have a reasonable end time. I don't like for us to get too late in the evening, because it doesn't leave us the best business and best work. So we're going to go ahead and move to Butler and 7th Avenue Stormwater Improvements Project. We'll have a presentation by KHA. I do believe that the flavor that we have taken with us on this first conversation will be beneficial. I think that we'll hear the presentation from KHA, then we'll hear our remaining public input for those individuals that did not comment on the other or may have additional comment for this particular project, and then council can discuss. Thank you.
Mayor, if we can, while Hal's setting up, can we take a 5-minute break? Some of us have been on a Zoom call since 4 p.m. and
yeah, no, understood. No need to go into detail. We'll take a 5-minute recess, and we will be back at 8:24 or something like that. Sound good?
All right, I'll pause recording. Thank you.
8:25. We'll now call our workshop for the Town of Windermere back into session. I just want to make sure that we have all of our council members here. Bill mentioned going to get a drink, so that hopefully the kitchen's not far.
Water.
I'm sure that's what he meant. All right. I know Councilperson Sapp is conserving internet. I see Councilperson Williams, Councilperson Andert, Councilperson McKinley, and Captain Morgan. Bill, you there? Well, we have a quorum, so let's continue to move forward then. We'll let him join us in a moment.
Okay, Mayor, if I may, I can go ahead and start the presentation, then I'll turn it over to Hal for actual discussion and then answer any of your questions and get to public comment. But again, I want to reiterate that this is not supposed to be an adversarial discussion. We are relaying concepts based on engineering practices and standards. So this is a dialogue that, you know, again, we want it to be cordial. We want it to be, you know, informative. We want to provide the facts to make sure that whatever we do moving forward, we're consistent. So again, if this is your first time, it's not adversarial. We're just trying to debate and discuss. This IPO is actually different than the First and Forest IPO. If you remember, we had discussions over the IPO for Kinley Horn Associates relative to the road designs. We had a lot of discussion relative to paved versus dirt roads. And what resulted out of that was staff was directed to move forward with dirt typical sections for roadways such as Butler and 7th, and come back with adequate drainage facilities for those roadways. This is one of those projects that is funded through the local mitigation strategy that is funded through FEMA. And that's why we have adhered to minimum lane widths. As I had discussed with a lot of the residents during the Zoom meeting that we had, you know, we're kind of dealt with, you know, creating the possible out of the impossible. We want the nice dirt roads. We want the charm. We want to make sure there's reduced speed. We want to make sure that we keep all the trees. Yet we want none of the bad stuff. So that's why you have professionals here to try to figure out the best way in order to do that while adhering to standards and trying to make the impossible possible. You know, in the past, we've been, again, as I said before, consistently inconsistent. I think Councilmember Martini made it clear is, you know, right now there's pretty much a different maintenance plan for every intersection that you have in the town of Windermere and every roadway that you have in the town of Windermere. And the reason for that is there's no consistency between the roadways and the typical widths of the roadways. Now, can we come up with 3 typical sections for different areas? Absolutely. You know, but the direction that we need is, you know, what road width are we looking at? If we want to maintain that 9-foot minimum width, which would be 18 feet, then we can manipulate, again, the shoulder width and also the types of stormwater drainage plans that we put into place while maintaining that. I'd be remiss to say that, again, part of the discussion that we had when we're talking about paving the roadways was instead of a 47 to 42 foot encroachment, you would have had a 20 to 22 foot encroachment if we were to look at either paving or a semi-pervious pavement. So that's why we brought that issue to you, because it's going to be less impactful. But with a dirt roadway and maintaining that dirt roadway, again, it's going to be more impactful to a larger area. You know, we did have that Zoom meeting and we made sure that we listened. A lot of the issues that we heard from the residents on First and Forest were consistent with what we heard on Butler and 7th. One of the issues is that, you know, they have the fear of the widening, you know, and they were worried about when they saw the entire 60-foot conceptual plan. When we explained to them that it's just a concept at this point, and then we're working on actually moving into a more defined concept, utilizing the minimum standards, then there was more reception to the actual plans. When we had the Zoom meeting, again, people jumped on the 15-foot when we talk about the emergency minimum widths. But again, if we're looking at grants, federal funds, and so forth, we want to make sure that we're maintaining or utilizing minimum standards set forth by the Florida Green Book or the Department of Highway Safety. And we also heard about the 6-foot shoulder. You know, when you look at the actual plans, everybody's like, why do you have a 6-foot shoulder on the south side of the roadway in the conceptual plans? Well, the 6-foot shoulder, number one, is required per the Green Book, unless you have those variables that Hal discussed. But also it's going to allow us to put water lines on 7th and on Butler. In order to maintain those lines, the minimum width has to be 6 feet for us to go ahead and gain those areas. So you'd have, again, you'd have the 6 feet to the south. That's the minimum standard. And then you'd have 18 feet of roadway width, which would be, again, those minimum 9-foot travel lanes. And then the 3 to 6, we talked about, and that's where I got the other one mixed up. The 3 to 6 foot shoulder that we're talking about on the north side, you know, we can put the utility on the north side or the south side, depending upon where you want it. But if we're going to put it on either side, we have to make sure that we maintain a 6-foot clearance so we can maintain that line. You can't do 2 feet, you can't do 1 foot, you can't do 3 foot, because these are 6-inch lines that are going in there, and you need to get the equipment to make sure they can dig it up and make sure that the shoring's safe for the people to be in there on when they're actually working on those lines. And then also you see, you know, the balance of that shows the ditch. Well, the ditch is the actual swale, and that can range depending upon how wide everything else is. Now, prior to this meeting and after we had discussions with the residents along 7th, Forest, and Butler, we do believe that we can minimize the concept that would show, again, 42 to 44 feet of right-of-way width, which leaves 18 feet for the property owners that are adjacent to the roadway, whether it be on the north or the south. And if you split it evenly, it would be 9 foot on either side. So what they can do is they can take a measuring tape from the actual right-of-way line, show 9 feet, and that's where the swale would start, or the grassed shoulder would start, not the roadway. In addition to that, you know, with that reduced amount of right-of-way, we're able to meander that roadway to make sure that we're protecting certain areas. I know that Tom Stroopsani is going to be talking about the vegetation and the trees that are on his property, also the 1887 schoolhouse trees. By reducing the right-of-way needed for our typical section of 9 feet, we would be able to accomplish this. Whether we accomplish it as much as possible. You know, we would try to create retention areas either along the town's right-of-ways or in other areas that we may have access to. And if you look at actually Butler, it's pretty much clear. You know, we don't believe that there's going to be many tree impacts if we reduce this right-of-way to what we believe we can reduce it to. So you don't have to worry about the speed, because I do believe that in some areas on Butler, it's actually 20 feet. Sorry. So you're actually reducing it to the 18 feet. It's going to allow those 6-foot shoulders, and you would actually have one side of swales, not two sides of swales. So when you see both sides having a swale system or a ditch system, we do believe that we're able to do, and you guys can add this up, it would be a 6-foot shoulder, 18 feet of roadway, 3 to 6 feet of shoulder, and then about 14 feet of swale, which again gets you to that 42 to 44 feet of right-of-way impacts. And I do believe that that would allow us again to, you know, accommodate as much as possible a lot of the concerns that we heard from the residents along both roadways. With the understanding too is that, you know, number one, we do want to be conscious of those people that are directly impacted, but we also have to be conscious of the people that are not directly impacted, that still need access to certain areas, whether they want to get to Fernwood, you know, deliveries, landscapers, stuff like that, or just, you know, trucks, cars, whatever's using that roadway. So yes, we want to be conscious of the people that are directly impacted, but we can't forget about the other people that are using these roadways as well. Again, we do as much as we can to listen, and we do as much as we can to adapt. That's as reasonable as possible. And with that said, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Hal with the proposed concept one. Again, the IPO directly asked them to come up with a concept for 7th and Butler, and to use not only the concept, but the drainage plan as well.
Thank you, Robert. So as Robert mentioned, this is the first draft of our concept to meet all engineering guidelines and the FDOT Green Book. It is definitely open for discussion. So I'm just going to present the first draft of what we came up with for Butler. Sticking with the 18-foot minimum, this was the first draft, and we did show 20 feet of width for the dirt road, because actually on Butler, it's narrow about 14 feet right here. But by the time that you get to the middle of Butler right here, it is about 20 feet, and around the curve, it's about 20 feet. So because of sections of Butler were already 20 feet, we use 20 feet as a typical width, just as a starting point. Now that can be reduced to 18 feet and still meet Green Book. And so these could be 18 feet if that's the direction we received today. So at the beginning of the project, I'll show you guys the profile. The high point is actually at 6, and then there's a pretty steep grade that we're trying to smooth out, and it drops all the way until you get to Fernwood Park, okay? So for the first section of roadway, I'm gonna zoom in right there. These properties here are a lot higher than Butler, so it wasn't feasible to grade a swale without significant impact. So we're proposing a shoulder gutter with inlets that will convey it via pipe to this first ditch that we have here, okay? And on this side, there are a couple of large oak trees, and because there's not a lot of runoff because you're at the very first part of your basin, your area, then we are proposing shallow V-swales in order to preserve these trees through here. And this is a normal crown section, meaning that the middle of the road is at the high point and it goes 2% in each direction. And I'm going to show you guys the typical for that here. So we did try to center up the road a little bit better from its existing, and it is dirt. The travel lanes here are shown as 20, but they can be reduced to 18 and still meet standard. Here's the 3.5-foot gutter on the east side, and then here's the 6-foot shoulder, and we will grade a shallow swale there in this area here, okay? So I'll go back to the next section. Sorry about that. So similar to Victor's exhibit, the cross hatching is the existing road. The cyan is the proposed dirt road. The green is where we're doing some minor swale grading or shoulders. And the brown, and that's a bad color, represents the ditches that we're proposing as our first concept. From this point on, there is a well-defined ditch over here. So in order to reduce the footprint and reduce the impact, as Robert has stated, our proposal is to pitch the road 2% to the east as you go around the curve. That benefits you in 2 ways. The first way is that it's a narrower footprint. The second is then it establishes a high point here along Fernwood Park, so you have less runoff going directly to Fernwood Park. There's also resident notifications to the town that there has been flooding on this property right here. And this would also establish a point where all the roadway runoff would drain into the swale system on the north side. And so that is why we're proposing what we would call a reverse crown section through here. We do understand that there is a 26-inch oak that's to be impacted here. We will partner with the town arborist to look at that tree. And we'll
I can't see anything. Where's his map?
Oh, I'm sorry.
You're talking and I haven't seen anything, but you.
Oh, you guys can't see my screen?
No, we can see it.
I'm able to see it.
I'm able to see it.
Yeah, I can.
I can see it, but would it be possible to move it further so that we show the entrance to Fernwood Park?
Sure.
Move it over a little bit.
Sure. Can you see Fernwood Park now?
Here's Fernwood.
Probably the way I have my screen set up.
Yes.
Okay, so
That's good, thanks.
no problem. So this is the reverse crown section, 20-foot wide with the ditch on the east side and then the north side, and addressing basically the runoff that's going to the low point of the basin, which is right in this area. We're also proposing this is the retention area that is at Fernwood Park. We're also proposing to regrade that to maximize the capacity, as well as provide a new outfall pipe into that retention area because the existing pipe is in poor condition. I'm going to switch to the typical section. Do you guys see a typical section? Are you seeing as I switch?
Yes.
Okay. So this is the typical section with the reverse crown, and then only the swell on the east side and then the north side. Okay. Now I'm going to go to as we turn the corner. So as we turn the corner, this is along 7th. So with 7th, generally the topography drops off from Main, and there is a little bit of a bowl here at Forest with just the existing topography and the washouts. We're trying to smooth all that out with our proposed profile, which is the purple, and getting that over to Fernwood Park more efficiently, and so you won't have that flooding issue anymore. I'm going to zoom into the plan view now. And 7th, like Robert had mentioned, is more challenging. 7th does get narrower than Butler. So we can definitely discuss the widths that we want to go with, but we want to maintain the 2% through here, and we have identified a 15-inch oak, a 20-inch oak, and a 12-inch oak that could possibly be impacted, and we would look at ways to try to save that if possible, perhaps by maybe jogging the ditch and making it narrower here and using some DBIs instead of a full ditch section through there. So we are aware of these tree impacts, and we definitely want to work with the town and residents on that. But there are tree impacts on both sides. So it's tough because you kind of have to pick one side or the other for your ditch in order for you to address the drainage. And we want to partner with you to pick that side. But no matter what side we pick, there may be some impacts, and we'd have to kind of go through what impacts are acceptable and what impacts we want to avoid. Now, as we go through Forest Street here, initially I had proposed a ditch on both sides, and I understand that that's going to impact a lot of trees over here near the 1887 school property. So in this section, we could do the same thing. We could do a reverse crown, and we could put a ditch on this side. So that would be an option that we could look at. And so anywhere where you see like a normal crown section, that takes up a bigger footprint because you have ditches on both sides. We could do a reverse crown section, and so that 60-foot footprint would go to more like a 44-foot footprint. Okay. Now I'm going to show you two typicals. 44. So I'm going to show you two typicals. The first typical is a typical that that there is expressed concern over, is that basically we would be taking a majority of the 60 feet of right-of-way for the dirt road, the shoulders, and the swells. And Robert and Scott and I have spent all day and been discussing this and been listening to feedback that I've been getting via emails. And so I've come up with a typical section that has not been shared because I just developed it today based upon feedback. And I'd like to share that with you and open it up for discussion. Because of the impacts on 7th to trees, we're looking at a typical section that, sorry, let me find it real quick.
Real quick, Hal, there's a question. What is DBI?
Oh, a DBI is a ditch bottom inlet.
Thank you.
So what it is that there's a balance here. If you put in too many ditch bottom inlets, you kind of run into the situation that you have with existing forest, where you don't have enough swells, and then the swells don't get established, and you can't grade the swells to a specific elevation, and then you get silting up of inlets and you get flooding. So we kind of really have to pick and choose where we want to narrow the swales and use ditch bottom inlets, because there are pros and cons with dirt roads for ditch bottom inlets. The con being that they do get silted up and they could not work properly. Now this is a work in process, definitely. I just put this together today. So what Robert was discussing was that we could shift the road away from the side where we're putting the ditch. And basically what would be a 60-foot of clearing or of construction would go down to 44 feet. Now that would give you basically an 8-foot buffer on both sides where we would not be disturbing the existing condition. You would pitch the road to one side, and then you would go with 9-foot travel lanes. This 6-foot shoulder would meet Florida Green Book, and it would also provides really two things. It provides a physical separation from the ditch, which is good from a safety roadside hazard standpoint. And it also provides room for you to run your water lines as part of this project when we get to the construction phase, which is further down the road. Over here, it's relatively flat. So there is an ability to maybe reduce the shoulder to 3 feet if that's the direction you want to go. So this is just a work in process that I wanted to present at the workshop that we just developed today. So with that, Robert, that's kind of where we're at. And from the feedback with the residents from our, our resident preview meeting, I do understand that there is a desire to narrow the road, similar to the concerns expressed on Forest today. But just realizing that if you go less than 18 feet, you do not meet Florida Green Book. And if that's the direction of council, we can proceed with that. But I would just like to point that out. And I know that's kind of beating a dead horse because we've talked about that a lot. So with that, I'll leave it up for discussion.
Yeah, and as Hal stated, again, we adapt to the comments made by the local residents, and this is what we came up with to not only make sure that we're adhering to the minimum standards, but we're taking care of the stormwater. Now it shows 17 feet as far as that ditch. Understand that can be reduced once we do the final design. Typically you're looking at about 14 feet, and that's where we get the 44 feet as far as potential impacts. Now it shows 8 feet on either side on the north and the south, but as Hal stated, when he gets to 1887 Schoolhouse, there's more vegetation to the north than there is to the south. That could be confirmed for site visits, for us going out there, and also across from the Stroups residence. You can see that there's more clearance on the south side than there is on the north side. So it may seem unfair, but in order for us to make sure that we maintain the tree canopy and so on and so forth, we may have to meander more towards one side than the other side. And hopefully people are understanding about that to make sure, again, that we're protecting that canopy as much as possible. And one of the comments that was made was if we had an arborist come out there, they're going to tell us that those trees are dead, diseased, or dying. But you can rest assured that we're going to do whatever we can to hopefully protect those trees. If we can make them healthy, we'll try to make them healthy, whether it's through pruning, whether it's through injections. But we'll again try to protect that canopy as much as possible, because we are trying to balance that charm with creating this typical section. And with that said, again, I think that this concept accomplishes everything that people have provided as far as input. But at this point now, we're at the mercy of both the council and the residents of what you would like to see.
I have one quick question. The 17 foot for the ditch, how is that determined? Is that based on water flow or width of the road or what?
Sure, it's based upon not just the width of the road, but it's just based upon even anything that flows into the right of way, including offsite flow, areas within the right of way. Now, because the fact that we're basically reducing ditches on both sides to one ditch, that
Right.
17 feet is maybe a little conservative, but that kind of gives you a conservative estimate. So where that 17 feet comes from is that based upon a conceptual analysis, we assume that ditch would probably be about 2 feet deep at worst case scenario. So we want a 1 to 4 front slope, which is maintainable. So that gives you 8 feet. And then if we want like a 3-foot bottom, that gives you 11 feet. And then we were thinking a 1 to 3 back slope. So that gives you 17 feet total. If we find that the ditch only needs to be a foot or a foot and a half, then we can reduce that. But this is a conservative estimate so that you know of the impacts.
Okay, yeah, that, I was just wondering how you came up with that number. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right. So I appreciate the new concept. That's interesting and helpful as well. I think one of the things we may also want to consider before we go to public comment here is, you know, if we did want to tweak the width, we could potentially have FEMA approve that ahead of time to make sure that it would still be appropriate for funding. So we could get clarification on that. All right, so at this point, I know we've got some folks who have been very patient and would like to comment. I'm glad that we were able to show the revised piece here prior to comment. And we can go ahead and start. I have a list running here.
Tom Stroop was first.
Okay, Tom, and then I think Jim Willard.
That was Tom, then Don, then Jim, then Joan Foglia, and then we'll go down the line from there.
Yep, and Teresa's in there and some other folks. Okay, great. Sounds good.
Okay, thank you. So if I'm looking at this new drawing here, Hal, this is looking like the ditch part is going towards the north?
Yes, correct.
Okay, so I do appreciate all the effort you're putting into that, but so that still takes 23 feet of my vegetation, unfortunately. And according to the current plan, it runs all the way from Main Street all the way down to Butler. For the most part, it's actually all of what I've always considered my front yard because I've always taken care of it and maintained it. So that's 23 feet from actually further than where the road is now towards my house. It's just pretty much, as you say, it at risk, right?
That's if it doesn't shift further to the south in order to protect vegetation and trees.
Okay, thank you. So, and Robert and I have talked about, and I've talked to every town council person. I really do appreciate all the effort put into this. I think it's very obvious, and we spoke about this whenever we talked about the paved roads, is that the town doesn't want it. I mean, for the most part, the town doesn't want it, and I think that's the reason we voted down the paved roads. And I think that we should make every effort we can to accommodate what the people who live here want. Robert, God bless you. I'm glad you're here, but the truth is you may not be here in 5 years. I plan on dying in this house, so whatever affects me on this is going to affect me more than it does, you know, anybody else, because I live here. So if I sound passionate, it's because I am passionate about it, because I plan on staying here indefinitely, God willing. So what I would say is, and I've said it to everybody, and once again, I do appreciate everybody's effort on this. I spoke to everybody on my street or whatever, and they all want the same thing. They want to maintain the smaller streets. I would say, you know, trash and fire trucks come down the street. Trash trucks come down 3 times a week. Fire trucks come down once a week. They've never had any problem accessing anything. They go to train down at the dock down there, and they have no problem getting in or out. And the trash trucks are probably bigger than most fire trucks or ambulances anyway, and same to do with service vehicles. But I would like to say that how, and I'd really just, this is an invitation to you, and I appreciate your hard work also. I would really love to meet you out here on this street and show you some of the things that I have personally observed over the last 22 years of watching water run down this street. And I hope that it might have some effect on what you believe, because I do not think that the water should run all the way from Main Street down to Butler. I think it should stop at Forest and get diverted to the north in a big swale that's already there. And the water's never crested Forest Street and come down, excuse me, 7th. So I think instead of having the water come all the way from Main Street straight down to the Butler, it should deviate and go to the north at Forest. And I think if I show you that and you see it, I would hope that you would agree, which means that then we only need to mitigate water coming from Forest to Butler, which means that hopefully we can reduce the size of everything, because it'd be less water going towards Butler as opposed to all the water from Main Street running all the way down. So my
45 seconds.
I'm sorry?
About 45 seconds, but if Donna wants to defer to you, you get an additional 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. No, she's got something to say. So I have a personal invitation to you, and it's not meant to be confrontational. It's meant to be educational. And I want to show you what I've observed for the last 20-something years of water going down these streets, and hopefully maybe get you thinking in just a little bit of different direction, and maybe be able to echo that to Robert and some of the town council. So thank you for your time. And Howard, once again, after this meeting, I would like to contact you and see if I can just meet you down here just to show you what I'm talking about.
Thank you, Tom. Did you give your address, sir?
Yeah, I typed it in when we first started. 201
Perfect.
West 7. Dawn wants to talk now.
Oh, okay. Dawn.
Hi, how are you? I just want to say thank you for listening, and I'm grateful and thankful, you know, to live here. I just, I don't know. I can't sleep at night, and I just feel disappointed. I feel discouraged with this plan. You know, obviously it's wider road, that's grass swales, it's ditches, it's more speeding, it's more parking, it's less trees. And I know Hal said that, you know, they only marked the trees that were over 4 inches, but and that's 13 trees that they marked. But we have magnolias, we have palms, we have tabuis, we have many small oaks that we've planted that replace the trees that have already fallen down, not to include all our lower landscaping, you know, ferns and philodendron, gardenias and jasmine, which all mitigate our stormwater. You know, so it's not a grass swale replacing everything we've planted over the last 20 years is not better than what we have. Honestly, this is keeping it, and it also comes right up to the edge of another 40+ oak that is right on the other edge that I think would be you know, affected also. I also, you know, the drainage issues did not begin until the asphalt was put down on our road. When we had the dirt road, just the way it is, it was perfectly fine. Nobody's house flooded. Nobody complained of anything. The asphalt went down the roads, the water went in the wrong direction, and they stopped grading it with the box blade because they can't, because of the asphalt. So you know, solutions I wrote, if you know, we could remove the asphalt or we could replace it with new sand, if we could, you know, if we could help save our trees by, you know, using the current swales and the culverts that are already there, just improving their efficiency. If we could just work, you know, around what we have, because it's so beautiful here. People call it a slice of heaven here, and it is. And I don't know. And if it could all be directed to a rain garden in Fernwood Park, that would be awesome. And if the grant requires us to make this road wider and to do all these things to make it worse here, not better, I just feel like we should do the less that we can, because once we go this far, we can't come back. We can't come back to this. It is just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And what we have is just so beautiful. I'm just so sorry. But so I don't know if any way you guys would consider a smaller improvements made to these dirt roads, to box blade them, to use some swales that we have, to use some culverts that we already have, you know. I just thank you for your time, and I thank you for your open mind with this, and I really appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Don.
Thank you so much, Don. We appreciate that.
Okay, sorry.
No, you're fine. We're all neighbors. That's what we're here for.
Okay,
Perfect,
yeah,
honey.
okay.
Mr.
Oh, I gotta
Miller.
mute it now. We're both crying, so I gotta mute it now.
Hey, Robert, my audio working?
Yes, sir.
Okay, my wife and I live at 228 West 7th, and you know, this agenda item is a stormwater improvement matter. That's how it's billed. And I think we're probably have the only house that actually has been flooded. And it happened last summer in July of 2019, not that long after the, you know, as this last speaker said, the road was redone with asphalt fillings, and the road was raised and the contour was changed, and our house got flooded twice, which I had to repair myself. Anna Mae Clounce at the end of Butler, you know, she's at the bottom of Butler, we're at the bottom of 7th, and so from a stormwater aspect, we're very interested. I happen to believe exactly what Howe has designed is going to work. So, you know, he's removing the road, he's changing the elevation, he's recontouring it, he's grading it to the north into an existing and a to be improved ditch system. And I think that will work fine. So from a stormwater aspect, you know, I think we're going to be taken care of, and it's overdue, but we're glad to see it coming. I do want to make a comment that needs to be made about these Green Book standards, because what is basically a stormwater grant, and what FEMA's interested is in stormwater treatment and taking care of the water has turned into a discussion about roads. Those FDOT Green Book standards are really more of a guideline than a standard. They're no more a standard than the Southern Building Code or the Town of Windermere zoning or building code or development standards. And you guys make variances and special exceptions to them every month. And that happens with buildings all the time, and it happens with roads all the time. There's tons of variances made to these standards, which are designed for uniformity and perfect conditions, usually for new construction, but seldom work properly in renovations or reconstruction of roads, especially in small towns. So we're not, we're a town, you're a municipality. The town council is the ultimate authority. DOT is not going to come in here and check on this road. We haven't had a standard road in 100 years. All of the Town of Windermere roads are substandard. And there's no liability associated with deviating from the Green Book standards. And you have plenty of justification for it. The fact that your speed limits are what, 15, 20 miles an hour? They're historically, narrow roads. They've always been that way. And, there's plenty of justification for maintaining what you have or building something, improving it to a lower standard than in the Green Book. And I think we need to challenge the engineers to be a little more imaginative rather than designing to a book, design to what is actually out there. These are only a few blocks. And I think you can basically accommodate everyone's concerns and still have a road that drains properly.
Thank you, Mr. Willard. Who do we have?
Anime Klotz want to speak, as well as Teresa
Anime.
Myers and Susan Carter.
Thank you, Anime. Go ahead.
Hi, this is Anime Klontz. I live at 632 Butler Street for 33 years.
You wait 2 hours and you get 3.
The way that my property is situated is it's at the end of Butler, just as you're coming into Fernwood Park on the right. The road, Butler slopes down, and my property slopes down further from Butler, so I'm low. I remember drainage issues from the time I've lived in Windermere, with the roads rutting out and this and that. I will say over the last couple of years, I don't remember when, they got significantly worse. And I'm talking about water flooding down the side of my yard into my side yard, creating a lake where my personal swale is. I've had white water in front of my, right in front of my front porch down my driveway, and the water goes into my garage and trips the breaker and cuts off my electricity. I completely sympathize and agree with my neighbors about the character of our little spot in Windermere. I love the trees, I love the dirt roads. Everyone, I love the ambiance. Everyone who knows me knows I am a preservationist and I'm an environmentalist. And I do support that. However, I don't think anyone, I hope no one would agree that it's fair for me to take the stormwater into my yard. And that's exactly what's been happening. And some of my neighbors have understandably taken measures to protect their own properties, but it's happened at the expense of me because it just diverts more water into my yard. So my point and my request is that we need to fix this. And I am with everyone. Let's fix it with the least impact to our surrounding area and to our environment. But we need to fix this. I cannot be the swale for Butler Street. And thank you.
No.
Thank you, Anime. Next up is Teresa Myers. You're muted, Teresa.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now. Thank you, Teresa.
Okay. Hi, my name is Teresa Schwetzman Myers. I live at 2713 Tryon Place, Windermere, Florida. I served on the Windermere Tree Board for 15 years. I'm off of that now. I still serve on the Windermere Historical Board. My background is natural science, biology, and history. First of all, the water's coming from concrete, asphalt, and rooftops. That's where it's coming from. And we got to think outside the box. This is critical thinking. Stops the water is the trees. And we've lost a lot of trees through the hurricanes from 2014 all the way up to present day. The trees act as mini reservoirs, controlling runoff at the source. They reduce runoff by intercepting and holding rain on leaves, branches, and bark, increasing infiltration and storage of rainwater through the tree's root system, and reducing soil erosion by slowing rainfall before it strikes the soil. Removing the trees is not the answer. Just that 45-inch live oak on the corner of the schoolhouse takes care of 39,643 gallons of stormwater runoff just this year. Carbon sequestration is a whole nother aspect. But taking out large trees and then planting back little trees to replace them cannot do what those live oaks do. And that live oak is a 400-year-old live oak at the National Register Historic Site. We need to be cognizant not to disturb the National Register Historic Site. We tried to do that in 2013 and it almost got pulled off the National Register when we did it. So we cannot impact the historic trees on that site or put drainage fields on that site. It's the oldest site in the town. It was given as a National Register Historic Site, and we need to be aware that we cannot pull down the historic trees and specimens on there. That is part of the National Register Historic Site, not just the schoolhouse, but the site where the history and the horticulture happened there. The grove, the trees, everything there is part of the site. So I would urge you not to impact that site at all, with the exception on the west side where there's the fence line under the power lines. There's already a retention ditch there. You could just basically maintain that ditch again, open it up. I think Tom Stroop's been the one that's been did it, and I think Craig did it before Public Works stopped doing it. We need to be aware of what trees do. They are the answer. And I urge the engineers to go to treebenefits.com, the Center for Urban Forest Research. The answer to our problems here is to plant more trees and to use these biological engineering machines. That's what they do. They suck up tons of gallons of water and put it back up in the air. Cement can't do that. Ponds can't do that, but plants can do that. And especially large plants are awesome at doing it. And we've lost a lot of them. We need to replant back, and not just oaks, but a variety of Florida native trees that can do this.
Tom.
River birch, water oak, a lot of the water trees. The more diverse tree canopy we have, the healthier it will be, and the more they can do what protects our rivers, lakes, and waters, our Butler chain. So let's not talk about removing any trees. They're the ones that are protecting the lakes right now. And if you don't understand that basic biological concept, you need to review your biology. And I invite the engineers to think outside the box, think from square to round. Think about your natural biological engineering machines, trees that do exactly what you need to do here. Let's think about concepts that use that.
Teresa, thank you very much. We got you there. Thank you. I appreciate it. Ms. Carter.
Susan already spoke. Remember, Jim, she had to leave.
Oh, my apologies. She was on the list here. I'm sorry. Dean Miller.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks everybody for sharing your thoughts on these issues. I know they can be a little controversial, but I know we can come up with a solution. Obviously, I'm at 625 Butler Street. Alicia and I both live here. And yeah, there's definitely been some water issues with the Willards had, as well as Anime, and we are certainly sensitive to that and want to make sure that that's taken care of and addressed so that doesn't continue to happen again. But with that said, there's a resounding theme here that is not necessarily about the water mitigation, it's about the width of the roads. And Councilman McKinley said it earlier, as well as others, that those are decisions that we should be making based on why we all live here. And, on Butler Street, I understand that in certain areas it is narrower in some areas and wider in some areas. And as traffic comes down that road, vehicles do pick up speed. And I think we have to be really careful about what that looks like and how wide that will feel to encourage that. In a day and age when in urban planning, communities are being designed to help encourage pedestrian traffic and biking and slowing down traffic, we want to make sure we don't deviate from that and protect what we have. So I encourage you. I know that what we're putting together right now is going to be a standard, but I don't think it should be a standard based on just trying to obtain grants. It should be a standard on making sure that we're preserving why we all live here. And so I asked the town council to take that in consideration when you discuss this. And I think that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean. We appreciate that. Next up, we have Miss Brandy Haynes.
Can you hear me?
We can, Brandy.
Okay, hello. Brandy Haynes, 835 Oakdale Street. My concerns mirror a lot of what people are saying, and I do feel like, you already talked about Forest Street, and now we're talking about Butler Street, and the next project on the list is going to be East and 9th, which is where I live. And I know my neighbors there are have all the same concerns that everyone does along Butler and 7th and Forest, which is 60 foot wide is excessive. I mean, even 44 foot wide, as they said, if we reduce it, with one side versus the other is excessive. And even though I understand everyone says constantly that this is what we perceive to be our front yards, but the reality is there is an ordinance in the town that says we're all required to maintain that yard all the way out to the road, and we all use it and function it as a yard. And people have done that in this town for probably 100 years. So as for much as everyone wants to say it's perception, the reality is we do have those yards. We do maintain those. I've never seen the town mow the swales across the street for me. I have swales, on both sides for me, and on the other side, they don't maintain the existing swales. And I think we're going down a road just as a matter of seeking funding that is available from the government to build these projects rather than designing what the town needs and what the town residents want for width of road, for not paving, for maintaining the dirt streets. Just because there's a funding source out there doesn't mean we need to go get it. There are other ways of doing this, and I think that the residents spoke loud and clear a year ago, as well as now. I mean, even a year ago, everyone said, we don't want to see 60 foot wide. We were told then a year ago, it doesn't have to be that. It can be smaller, yet what's presented is 60 foot. And you can say all day long, this is what we're presenting, and we can scale it down. But I also know that I feel sorry for the council because they get bombarded with calls and comments for all the days leading up to these meetings because of things like this presented. And then we say, well, this is the worst case scenario and we can scale it back. But everybody made it clear a year ago, we don't want 60 feet. We don't want the paved roads. And every time some off the charts project like this is presented, it's just wasting everyone's time. It's wasting the resources.
30 seconds.
And it's wasting the time of the council members who, volunteer their time. But we need to scale it back because nobody's going to be happy with the same scenario, which is evidently coming up on 7th Street for my side of the town. And I wouldn't want to see it to happen to the people on the other side of the street. And I did see an email from a neighbor that said you guys are planning to hang door knockers. I think you guys need to reach out in other avenues. Most of my neighbors have been gone for most of the summer. I've had neighbors that are all in the impacted area you're talking about that's been gone for 4 months, 3 months, 2 months, 1. Yeah, I hear you. So I think that the town needs to reach out other than door knockers. That's not guaranteeing you're getting a hold of people.
She said time and she said, yeah, I hear you.
Thank you, Brandy.
Yeah. In response to that, there's so much the town can do to notify residents. We advertise on the website, Facebook, Instagram. We have an app. We have e-notifications. And now we've even gone to pretty much knocking on doors to allow people or to give people notice of future meetings. So I think we've gone above and beyond as far as notification wise.
Well, unless we specifically email you to ask for a copy of what's going on with this project, we don't hear anything. Every time I've asked you at a meeting for what this information is, you tell me I have to email you to get it. If we're a resident that are impacted by it, we shouldn't have to email you guys to dig you got the information out, just like Mrs. Lopez said.
It's been on the website.
All right, thank you guys. Ms. Foglio.
Can everyone hear me?
We can.
Good evening, everyone. First of all, I want to say that I disagree with Brandy to a certain extent, because I even told Teresa this evening, that as citizens, we're all responsible for going to the meetings, for looking at the meetings minutes to find out what's going on with the town. We can't be, babysat with everything that's going on in the town. Second of all, we're all intelligent people here. This was a preliminary design, and I feel that we can all together create a win-win situation for everyone, that everyone's needs are met, that we can mitigate the stormwater runoff. We can still preserve the look of the town, and we just have to figure out how to do that together. And I think that we can achieve that common goal. So I feel positive about this. I don't feel that historic trees will be removed. I think we can figure all this out. Thank you.
Thank you, Joan. We appreciate that. Did you give your address, Joan, real quick?
215 Butler Street.
Thank you very much. Have I left anyone from the public for comment out?
Carol Weller decided not to comment on the matter.
I see Stephen Withers has his hand up. Stephen, go ahead.
Yes, a couple of things. One is I live on 712 Main Street, which is dirt main between 7th and 8th. And we used to have big ditches run all the way down through there every time it rained. And then Scott put a berm halfway down, and now the water runs into the old railroad right-of-way. Coming off of Main Street, going down 7th, half of it turns on a dirt main and half goes down 7th. We could divert all of it into that railroad right-of-way and take water off of 7th at that point. The other point I'd like to make is the engineers keep talking about smoothing the grade out, flatten it out all the way from Main Street down to Fernwood Park. And what we've noticed on my street is by having a berm halfway down, the water does move into those ditches and slows the water down. So a continuous straight shot of water running down the street is going to get it speed up, which is going to dig the ditches. The other thing I would like to notice is that we have talked about a 2% slope on the road, yet when they grade it, I don't think those graders can put a 2% slope on the road. So I'm concerned that it end up flat again and don't go into the ditches. We've got to figure out some way to get the maintenance so it does maintain
20 seconds.
the slope into the ditches. The only thing I've ever seen on 7th that was a big problem was down at Jim Willard's place, where the water does dig ditches in the curve there. So those are my comments. I think I'd like to be on the meeting with Tom Stroop and the engineers to show them what we did at the top of the hill so we can take water off of 7th.
Thank you. Thank you, Stephen. We appreciate your input tonight. Any further input from the public before I turn this over to council? Seeing none. Okay, council. So certainly looking for questions and input from you all this evening as we take on this portion of the agenda.
I'll jump in.
All right, Mr. Martini.
Mayor and engineering, as regards the historical schoolhouse and that site, is it possible to do like a modified version instead of having the same layout, or basically engineering for the whole entire 7th Avenue, is to do like a modification for that portion of 7th so that we can maintain what's already there, keep it the way it is, not risk, changing the designation, keep as many trees as possible. And then, for the rest of it, I think Jim Willard said it best. you know, there is a way to accommodate everyone's concerns and still have a road that drains properly and and keep the charm and character of the town. That has to be the ultimate goal, not necessarily getting grant money. And that's, I think, basically, in a nutshell, what all the residents have said tonight. So I'm going to leave it at that.
Thank you, Councilperson Martini. I'd also like us to make sure that that if we're going to engineer the solution, that we utilize the grant money as well, because that's actually what's going to make a better project possible if we're able to do this and it's supported. Or no matter what type of project we do there, we want to make sure we use that grant money, because otherwise it goes on a 5 to 10 year plan somewhere down the road.
I agree. I agree.
You know,
But getting the grant money and spending it is not the priority, I don't think, for these residents, from what I'm hearing.
no, I understand that, and I appreciate that. But I also want to make sure that we do address those flooding concerns, because we know those can be issues.
I think there's middle ground there. And it's greater than 2%. So
we're gonna find it. All right. Who else would like to comment?
I would like to echo the idea of maybe foregoing some of the prioritization of grant money, at least for this particular area. You know, maybe look at grant money in other areas of town, but recognize that maybe this is an area that we try to self-fund. That's one option. The other thing is, you know, I'm curious about the idea of trying to find some ways to manage stormwater that are aesthetically pleasing and that add to the character of the town. So maybe when we've talked a little bit about, I know there have been ideas presented by neighbors about having some stormwater retention over on that west side of the grove at the schoolhouse, maybe making that a rain garden. That was also one of the suggestions down at Fernwood Park. So those aren't just retention ponds, they're actually rain gardens that have native plants in there and then aren't just functional, but they're actually an addition to the aesthetics of the area and add to the character of the town. So,
Councilmember Andrew, I didn't want to interrupt you, but we do have Mallory on from Kimley Horner Associates that was here to directly speak about that subject matter. We just didn't have an opportunity to get to her about water quality and how to possibly utilize those ditches and swales as rain gardens.
Okay. Robert, if I may share a screen, we did look into the rain garden ideas and we do think it's a good idea. And I know that it is really late and I understand that we didn't really get to the water quality portion, but if possible, could I just share a screen to show you the slide of what we're looking at?
Yes, please do that. And I, you know, I think we should hear about these things. I know that it is late, but you know, we've got everybody here and it'll never be better than now.
Sure. So can you guys see a PowerPoint screen?
Yep. Yes.
Okay. So if it's okay, I think Mallory, you can maybe a couple minutes just to go through the slides real quick, if you guys are okay with taking a little bit more time tonight.
Yes, please.
Okay. So Mallory, you're up. I'll go ahead and start the, I won't, there we go. I'll just go slide by slide. So
yeah, we can jump through it pretty quickly. I can summarize, but I can pretty much just talk about what we looked into. Reminder that this is still in the study level, so we haven't done any official design calculations, but so Lake Butler is impaired for nitrogen, so that's specifically the parameter that I was looking at. The next slide shows a water quality treatment software that I used to actually model with different applications of different stormwater BMPs what efficiency removal we got. And so then moving on, I think, yeah, so one of the first things I looked at was just with the swales alone. So with the transfer from water actually crossing the dirt streets to get to Fernwood Park or to downstream, with Howe's design of cresting the road and getting the water into the swales first before it gets downstream, the removal that we can attain is almost 60% just from passing the water through the swales first prior to getting them downstream to the outfall. So then if we added that retention pond at the end, which is already in the design, and we take that into account, it achieves even greater removal. So between the swales and the retention pond, it kind of provides a separation for that water before it gets into Lake Butler, and it gets a lot of that nitrogen out that way alone. So then in addition to that, that next fun slide with all the rain garden pictures, if we turned that retention pond into a rain garden, added the plants, similar to the discussion of trees and how they uptake all those nutrients, by putting those in a rain garden like that, we could really enhance the amount of nitrogen removal. It also slows down the water, so it does cause detention, which helps the water to infiltrate prior to getting out into Lake Butler. So that infiltration achieves more removal and attenuation for stormwater. And the removal efficiency, you can see there, we can add media that helps take up even more. So we can achieve, you know, almost 100% removal, keeping it out of Lake Butler. I think we did look into putting some of those plants into the swales themselves. Typically, those sort of applications, they become maintenance issues. So because of the sediment from the roads that we have, if we get that sediment build up over time into a swale with lots of plants and media or gravel, then that removal is a little bit more difficult. So we may get more removal, but over time the sediment buildup will clog the actual infiltration in the rain garden. So the swales themselves might need sort of an offline area for retention for rain garden plants. So that's something we can look at more, but this shows just the amount of nitrogen removal you achieve with the rain garden just downstream at Fernwood Park.
I appreciate that. I wasn't talking about having and I do want to have the rain garden down at Fernwood Park, but I wasn't proposing rain garden planting in the swales. There's kind of a semi-functional ditch that's right now created. It's almost a retention pond that's existing over on Forest Street on the west side of the grove that's at the schoolhouse site. And if we could expand that or make that into, so it's not really a swale that's going along 7th. It's actually, it would be kind of in effect a retention pond that would now be turned into a rain garden, kind of a step down from Main Street.
Yeah, and any series of best management practices like that can just increase the amount of removal. So any other available space that's open to us that we're able to use could be implemented in that way. There are a few other things that could be done. Any sort of vegetated plantings along Lake Butler were recommended in the Harvey Harper report, The Chain of Lakes. Hydrologic and nutrient budgets and management plan report suggested natural or created shorelines. So those are some other additional treatment we could put in the Fernwood Park area. And I think there might be one more slide which just adds some more third-party treatment removal options, which are removal media that could be added into the rain garden itself or a retention pond by itself that just add increased removal of nitrogen and phosphorus. So those are all the options that we looked at, but we can also look at different applications of them in different ways once the design gets solidified.
Thank you, Mallory. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mallory, for sticking there with us.
Sticking in, we're gonna make sure we get everybody. Hey, I think it's a great concept. I mean, in terms of what we do with the water, and again, going to do everything that we can do to protect the lakes. And certainly if we were to have an intermediate stop, you may be able to reduce some of that flow and allow for some smaller water transporting methods downstream. But also the key here, though, is you still have to move the water to those gardens as well. So we still got to get past that hurdle to make these work in addition. So appreciate all the input there. Thank you. Okay, Liz, does that help you, Liz? Or
yeah, I'm fine with that.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, we did forget about Frank Krenz. He did sign up.
Hang on. Frank, I'm sorry. I'm going to move my chat box and I can see you now. There you go. All right.
Okay, I
like to
really
comment,
hadn't signed up, but I just had a stray
Oh.
thought. It may be too crazy, but is it possible to close some streets that are hopelessly problematic? Just close them. Use the street area for water retention, treatment, whatever. If you did that to 7th, you'd still have access to Fernwood from Butler. It makes a lot of things harder, garbage trucks, etc. But you could solve the problem.
What problem?
Possibly that we we made street one way, and it took us 8 meetings and 20 studies. But I hear where you're going. It kind of goes along with the one-way concept that Councilperson Martini had mentioned earlier. You know, and it is thinking outside the box. I mean, I'd have to say I couldn't answer that question off the top of my head at a meeting here. We'd really have to look at it because of access, and some of those street addresses only go out onto 7th. So
Yep.
But again, thank you. That's thinking.
Great.
Also, I think I saw Stephen Withers. He suggests that we can go back and have everybody maintain their 1 inch of water. That'll help a lot. And we have talked about that. But I think we better take care of one dragon at a time here tonight.
Thank you.
All right. So, Councilperson Ander, Councilperson Sapp. Good night. All right, everybody jump in. We'll all get a
All right,
hug
can
from
you hear me?
Councilperson Ander before we go to sleep.
Sorry.
Councilperson Sapp.
All right, I'm back in business, I think. Let's just go back. I mean, we've already discussed this, with the first project on there, we'll see what we can tighten up. I do disagree that we should not be looking at these grants. These are hundreds of thousands of dollars that they're saving the town, and it's got to come from somewhere. So if it's not coming from these grants, it's going to come from our taxpayers here locally. But I'm wondering, the simple average is 16 feet. If we can get somewhere there as a typical, and if we approach FEMA and the people over at LMS, see what their thoughts are, if the road is that important with this project, or if they're solely focused on the stormwater portion of it.
We can go back to them and ask them and see if they would be acceptable to something that doesn't meet any established standard, and see what their thoughts are. The problem is dealing with FEMA and different reviewers, you're going to get a different answer from a different person. And I think Mayor O'Brien and Councilmember Martini can agree with that statement. It all depends on who you get with the luck of the draw.
Welcome to my world day in and day out. But all that being said, Robert, it's certainly worth the shot and the opportunity, and with good justification, we certainly probably have a good shot at getting a blessing on that.
Yeah, I personally need to know that information before, any hard vote on, where we're going with final design for sure.
You call until you get the right person.
Yeah, and if we are looking to go to, something sub 15 feet, maybe we do look at, one-way roads throughout the grid system, because we have to make sure they're safe for the fire trucks and things like that to get through, and especially when we have these storms and down trees, we need to be able to get around them.
Chris,
we do have 12 foot of shoulder too to work with.
And Chris, I have a building full of FEMA experts here, so let's see, maybe we can accelerate that and get an answer. That would be cool, and that might help us.
Yeah, and to Councilmember Sapp's point is, relative to the burden on the taxpayers. Currently we only have about $120,000 or $130,000 that we can use for stormwater projects on a fiscal year basis. These projects cost well above that amount. So in order to self-fund these projects that we've been discussing tonight, you're probably looking at tripling, if not quadrupling, the assessment, which I know nobody wants to hear.
Especially, I want us to be mindful, we're still dealing a lot with, and we've been blessed as a town not to be severely impacted from a budgetary standpoint, but I will tell you that is not the case for many municipalities in relation to the slowdown in the economy due to COVID. So, and that is not going to go away overnight. So we do need to be careful and mindful that this could be another long budgetary cycle as we move forward. So we do want to be really careful. Let's see, Councilman McKinley, are your comments the same, or do you have additional comments for?
No, basically the same. You know, I like to keep the roads as narrow as possible, but you know, also safe. But Mr. Withers brought up an excellent point, and we have one there on 7th Avenue right now where there is a berm that has been created in the middle of the road at 7th and Forest that diverts that water off that's coming down from Main Street. And that's been used over here by my house on 5th Avenue very successfully in helping with the dirt road to turn the water in the direction we want it to go. So we can direct the flow of water somewhat with that. That's just something that we need to look and making the street level. Yeah, if you went from my house down to 1st Avenue and leveled all that out, by the time it got down to 1st Avenue, that water would be flying. And same on 7th Avenue. If that berm weren't there, we'd have more problems down by Fernwood than what we already have. But I like the idea of possibly turning that, especially that area there in Fernwood Park, that retention area, into a rain garden. That would really help. So,
yeah, it's a hit.
Yeah. But other than that, I mean, the plan looks good. It's just that, you know, we need to take a look at the width and see what we can do to make it more Windermerean.
So I wonder, and you know, here, I'm going to put a variable in there. Of course, several people have talked about it, but if we are able to divert some water from 7th onto that area by the schoolhouse and maybe enlarge that, turn it into a rain garden type situation, and then get us a secondary solution similar to what we've got up here, but maybe a little narrower to go down 7th further to get to Fernwood, and then from the top of the hill coming in from 5th or 6th. So that could be very interesting and potentially work, but I think we'd have to get the engineers to look at that again as well, because I don't know if that was considered. Maybe it was, and if it was, you can certainly mention that. That'd be great.
Yeah, we talked about it this afternoon, and again, I think we're going to get a consistent message that we can possibly move forward with relative to the conceptual, because again, it's concept. We'll do another round with the residents, getting their comments on some other typical sections and see if they're amenable to those, and then come back to town council with those thoughts for another workshop. Sorry to take away any of your time, Andrew.
Andrew.
And Andy. Sorry.
Andy, did I skip you, brother? Go
ahead. No worries. You know, I was going to just, you know, we keep going around on this. It's, you know, we're blessed and cursed. We're stuck between a set of lakes. So everything is downhill from Main Street. Take your pick, you know. And we've always used the intersections on the dirt roads to slow things down and divert a little bit of water so we don't have excessive amounts running multiple blocks. That's the way we've done it in the past. You know, looking at the Butler 7th plan, I think it's a sound plan. It definitely needs to be reduced some because I think there's a lot of overage in it. But coming back to something that Mr. Withers said, I also want to get back to looking at a lot of the homes that don't retain their water. Butler Street is terrible about it. You go up and down Butler from 5th all the way down to 7th, you can see the water. And I hate to see 1 or 2 or 3 homeowners end up having to retain it. When you look at the Butler plan, we've got 2 ditches. It's in front of 2 homes. And nothing further up where there are no burns in those yards. So, as we move forward with this plan, I still think we need to look back and go, even if we're putting them in on our own dime, we need to slow some of the water further uphill. So when it gets to the bottom, it's manageable. That's what I got.
So,
through code enforcement, so we'd have to look at.
I know. I didn't say it was easy.
hey, I don't know if they make a Zoom meeting big enough for that, Andy, but I do think that it is part of the problem. And if we want to be serious about what we're doing in town in terms of water, then that's something that we can definitely discuss.
I spent a couple hours this afternoon talking to neighbors that were out in their yards walking around, and I was up and down Butler. I mean, I drive it all the time, but walking it and looking at the trees and looking at who's got, utility poles in the middle of their yard or on the sides and things that we're going to have to move for these ditches and this road project that are going to have to be adjusted too. And see who's taking on the majority of the burden also.
You can come up to my house and see Lake Butler there on the side of the garage.
I stop at your house often and wave as I go by.
All right. I think that I can again kind of sum it up in terms of what council is thinking, and clearly it's let's look at the schoolhouse location for some potential storage. Narrow that up. Let's get a map of our trees so we know exactly what we're talking about, and see if we can squeeze some more engineering magic out of our town engineers. Does that sound good, Robert?
Sir, we'll try to find that magic wand.
Yes, it comes from Hogwarts. Tom, go ahead, sir.
I'm sorry, I don't want to cut you off, but just to clarify, we're not talking about going into the schoolhouse Orange Grove property. That ditch is on the west side of that fence. So I don't want to spook everybody and have them all get up in arms about.
Thank you, Tom.
Yeah,
Yep.
so it's not.
No, I appreciate it.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
That's mitigation right there. You're doing a great job for me. I appreciate that. I don't want to make anybody nervous. I do think that is a good option though to do some work with, and good thinking and smart work. All right, I see some little ones that are hugging parents wanting to go to sleep. Do we have anything else for the good of the order tonight?
Just a reminder to most of the people that are on right now, we have our second Fernwood charrette tomorrow at 6 p.m.
No.
Dang.
So we get to do this 3 nights this week. All right, rock and roll.
4 nights in a row. I have
4 nights in a row.
Wednesday.
All right. Hey, it's been great seeing everybody. I know these are difficult conversations sometimes, but what I love about our town and all of our neighbors is that we work through these things. We'll get it done. Thank you to staff. I know it's been difficult. Thank you to council for listening to everybody's input tonight and visiting the sites. And this has been one of our best. We had 44 people on at one point tonight. So again, we appreciate everybody's input, and everybody have a good night. And with that, we are adjourned at 9:43 p.m. It's like old times.
Happy birthday, Bob.
Happy birthday, Bob.
Hey, Bob.
We'll make it up to you.
Oh, no. It's part of the game.
The record. We're eating the cake tomorrow.